Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into the muddy, torchlit corridors of medieval Europe to explore a world where just being a little too pretty could put your life at serious risk. If you think a good skincare routine or a striking pair of eyes would have helped you back then, think again. In a time when superstition ran deep and vanity was practically a sin, beauty wasn't just a blessing, it was a bullseye. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late evening in a modest manor tucked away in the English countryside, 1348. You're sitting in front of a polished silver mirror, an item rare enough to be considered an extravagance. It's not glass, no, that wouldn't become common for a few more centuries. This mirror is more like a piece of art, curved metal burnished to a shine, reflecting your face in a hazy blur of light and shadow. You adjust your wimple and stare at yourself with a mix of curiosity and hesitation. You're young, radiant, and according to the town's priest, probably doomed. Word around the village is that your beauty isn't just unusual, it's unnatural. Your cheekbones, high and delicate, your skin pale and untouched by the sun, your lips a deep rose without a touch of balm. In another time, another place, this might be the start of a promising modelling career. But here, in this century, people are whispering that the devil may have kissed you at birth. Beauty in the medieval era was deeply double-edged. On one hand, it could open doors, figuratively and literally. You might catch the eye of a wealthy suitor, land yourself in a noble household, or at the very least avoid some of the harsher fates women faced. But the same face that brought favours also attracted scrutiny, envy, suspicion. In a culture where the church dictated the narrative, beauty wasn't something to admire, it was something to fear. Take the case of Lady Eleanor, a real noblewoman rumoured to have enchanted every man who saw her. Her hair was a river of gold, her eyes the colour of stormlit skies. People claimed she never aged, never fell ill, and never showed remorse. That last one really sealed it, because beauty without suffering? That was suspicious. They accused her of sorcery. She vanished shortly after her trial, and her lands were absorbed by the crown. Was she a witch? Or just too attractive for comfort? We'll never really know. The tricky thing was, people believed that beauty could be a weapon, and not metaphorically. It was thought that a woman's appearance could be used to cast spells, seduce holy men, or even summon demons. Beauty became evidence of moral corruption, a visible sign of invisible sin. If you looked too good, you clearly weren't working hard enough. If you weren't toiling, you weren't suffering. And if you weren't suffering, you were likely in league with something unpleasant. There's something eerie about how medieval society wove beauty into its moral compass. You had no say in your features, of course, genetics didn't have a PR team yet, but your appearance was seen as a conscious ethical statement. Were you fair-skinned in a time of farm labour, clearly lazy, wore perfume in the marketplace, probably luring men to ruin, smiled too often, hiding something? And then there's the fringe theory that still gets whispered in scholarly circles, that some women in the 14th and 15th centuries intentionally disfigured themselves to escape this curse. Small burns, scars made with knives, a bit of ash rubbed into the cheeks. Sounds horrific, and there's no hard evidence to say it was common practice. But a few confessions tucked into court records do hint at women spoiling their own gifts to avoid the suspicions beauty brought. Let's pause for a second and talk mirrors again. That polished silver in front of you, it's not just a mirror. According to the church, it might also be a portal. That's right. Mirrors were considered dangerous, literal windows to vanity, temptation, and even demonic influence. It was said that women who gazed too long into a mirror were inviting sin directly into their souls. Some monasteries even banned reflective surfaces entirely. A nun caught admiring herself might be sentenced to weeks of penance, or worse, exorcism. Yes, exorcism for eyeliner. All of this, of course, was tangled up in the grand social order. Medieval Europe loved hierarchy. You knew your place, and beauty messed with that. A beautiful peasant woman might draw the eye of a nobleman and threaten the fragile class system. A pretty servant could make a lady of the court feel insecure. The very sight of an attractive woman could stir feelings that had no acceptable outlet, because love, lust, and longing were all considered moral weaknesses, and moral weakness, as we've established, was fertile ground for accusations of witchcraft. You glance back at your mirror. Did you see that? Just a flicker in the reflection. You shake your head and laugh quietly. Maybe the stories are just getting to you. But as you turn away and snuff out the candle, you swear the silver still glows, just faintly in the dark. Beauty in this world isn't an asset, it's a liability. A beautiful face might be your downfall, a reason for exile, or a death sentence dressed up in scripture. And tomorrow, when you walk to the well, you'll feel the eyes on you, some admiring, some afraid, and some calculating. You'll wonder how many of them have already whispered your name to the priest. The truth is there's no winning here, not unless you're willing to play the game very, very carefully. The church has a problem, and it's not the usual medieval chaos of plagues or political treachery, it's your face. You don't mean for it to be a problem. You're not out here seducing monks or plotting the downfall of mankind, but you're too pretty, and the church doesn't know what to do with that. So they do what any institution would do in the face of confusion and fear. They make it your fault. It starts with sermons. Long, booming, Latin-heavy tirades from the pulpit about vanity, temptation, and the dangerous pull of the flesh. You sit in the back, head lowered, trying not to attract attention, but you can feel Father Benedict's eyes glance your way just a second too long when he warns the congregation of women who inflame the passions of men and awaken the darkness in their hearts. The old women nod solemnly, the younger ones glance sideways, the men try not to look at you and fail. The church isn't subtle. Beauty is framed as a tool of the devil, something he uses to lead righteous men astray. A beautiful woman, even if she says nothing, even if she wears modest clothes and avoids mirrors, becomes a walking test of a man's moral strength. If he stumbles, well, obviously she tempted him. It couldn't be his fault. This thinking wasn't just widespread, it was systematized. Theologians like St. Jerome and Tertullian wrote viciously about women's beauty being the root of male downfall. Eve's allure, after all, had brought about the fall of man. Women, they argued, carried that same dangerous power within them, passed down like a curse through the generations, and if a woman appeared especially beautiful, that was just the curse in full bloom. You pass a group of pilgrims one morning on the road and a friar stares too long. He frowns, crosses himself and mutters something under his breath. Later that week, your name comes up in the abbey's prayer requests. Request for purity in the village. That's a bad sign. There were efforts to suppress beauty, or at least the appearance of it. Rules were made about what women could wear. No silks, no bright colours, no jewellery unless you were of a certain rank. Even then, it was risky. Laws known as sumptuary codes policed clothing not just to maintain class boundaries, but to keep people from appearing too desirable. If your dress was too fine or your hair too elaborate, people wondered what you were trying to attract, or who. Let's talk about hair, because for medieval clerics it was practically a scandal in itself. Long, flowing hair was considered one of a woman's most powerful weapons. Loose hair, that meant something sensual, unbraided, unholy, so you were expected to hide it. Married women had to cover their hair in public, sometimes completely. Veils, wimples, linen caps. It didn't matter how stifling it was or how tangled your curls got underneath. Better to sweat through summer than risk inciting sin. This pressure wasn't just moral, it was magical. People believed beauty could attract not only the lust of men, but the attention of demons. The devil, they said, had a fondness for lovely faces. If he saw one, he might slip in beside her shadow, whisper things in her ear, turn her into his puppet. A beautiful woman who suddenly started speaking out of turn or dreaming vividly, or dancing alone under moonlight. Possessed, or bewitched, or maybe just thinking too loudly. And here's the really strange part. The fringe fact that slips into church records like a smudged ink blot. There are accounts, rare but notable, of exorcisms performed not because a woman spoke in tongues or levitated, but because she was too beautiful. That was the evidence. Her face, her effect on men. It was considered unnatural, a sign she must be under some dark influence. These women were scrubbed, anointed, prayed over, sometimes even physically restrained, all in the name of purging the devil's decoration. Now let's dip into one of those lingering scholarly debates that keeps medievalists awake at night. Did church officials genuinely believe beauty was dangerous, or were they just using it as a tool to control women's roles? The honest answer? Probably both. For some clergy, these ideas were real, terrifying threats to spiritual health. For others, it was a useful excuse to keep women in check, especially the ones who stood out. You know that awkward moment when you catch someone looking at you like you've committed a crime by just existing? That happens a lot lately. Even your friends have become cautious, reluctant. Your closest companion, Alice, once braided your hair and whispered about dreams of being noticed by a nobleman. Now she barely meets your eye. Her mother's started watching you like you're a candle that might catch the whole house on fire. At the next Mass, Father Benedict's sermon goes harder than usual. He rails against hidden evils, against the false beauty that masks decay. You know, without being told, that it's about you, and you know that everyone else knows it too. Afterward, a child asks his mother if you're a witch. She tells him not to say such things, but she doesn't sound entirely convinced herself. So what do? You can't change your face. You could try to dress plainer. Keep your eyes on the ground, speak softly, walk quickly, and pray often. But even that might not be enough, because the truth is, once the idea takes root that your beauty is dangerous, every smile, every silence, and every glance becomes suspicious. And in a world where the church defines morality, suspicion can be fatal. You go to bed that night with your veil beside your pillow, ready to throw it on at a moment's notice. The silver mirror? You wrapped it in cloth and shoved it deep into a trunk. But still, you can't shake the feeling that someone or something is watching you. Not from the outside, but from within. It starts with a compliment that doesn't sound like one. A merchant's wife passes you in the market square, offers a stiff smile and mutters, "Well, we can't all be blessed and burdened like you, can we?" Then she moves on, clutching her basket tighter, casting glances over her shoulder like you're going to cast a hex on her cabbage. You didn't say anything. You didn't even look at her, but it doesn't matter. At some point people stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a problem, and lately the whispers have shifted from pious disapproval to something colder. Witch, sorceress, heretic. You'd be surprised how often these accusations started with beauty. That's the part no one really tells you. People imagine witches as old crones with warts and hunched backs, but the medieval stereotype of a witch was often the exact opposite. She was too young, too pretty, too noticeable. A woman whose presence lingered just a second too long, who smiled at the wrong man, who wore a ribbon that looked new. Take the case of Maren of Lübeck, a woman whose beauty supposedly caused the deaths of 3 men, one from a fall, one from a sudden fever, and one from a broken heart. The town said it couldn't be coincidence. Her trial lasted 4 days. She was accused of summoning storms, cursing harvests, and turning milk sour. Her real crime? Walking past the mayor's son and making him blush. You're reminded of that when you pass the baker's apprentice, and he stumbles over his own feet trying not to look at you. The townspeople laugh, but not kindly. The miller shakes his head and mutters, "Just like the temptress in Bruges." You don't know what happened in Bruges, but the comparison doesn't feel good. The rules aren't written anywhere, but they're everywhere. Don't wear your hair down unless you're married or mad. Don't smile too broadly, or not at all. Don't walk alone. Don't sing where others can hear you. Don't speak to men unless spoken to first. And whatever you do, don't be too pretty when a storm hits, or a cow dies, or a child falls ill. Because someone will need someone to blame. And that someone might be you. You hear it in the way people start using softer words to cover harder meanings. She has a charm about her, they say, a strange look in her eyes. They say it with a tilt of the head, a downward glance. Your presence makes them uneasy, and they don't quite know why. That's when the shift starts, from curiosity to fear. The thing is, no one accuses you out loud, not yet. That would be too forward. Instead, they let the fear simmer. They let it cook, like a stew left too long over the fire until it boils and bubbles over. You start to notice little signs. The baker no longer offers you warm bread at the end of market day. The blacksmith, once friendly, now won't meet your eyes. A piece of broken pottery is left on your doorstep with no explanation. Some historians argue that these witch hunts, especially the early ones, had more to do with social pressure and personal resentment than any real belief in magic. In small villages, where everyone knew everyone, and life was brutally hard, a woman who stood out could easily be cast as a threat. Beauty wasn't just rare, it was an anomaly, and anomalies are dangerous. But then there's the more superstitious angle. Some believe that witches could lure men with a single look, a touch, even a scent. that their beauty was a glamir, something supernatural that masked their true forms. In some cases, women were accused simply because someone dreamed of them. Imagine that. A man has a strange dream about you, wakes up flustered and confused, and suddenly you're hauled before a tribunal for influencing his thoughts. Your mind flashes back to a moment last week when a young priest paused in his prayers as you walked by. He had to restart from the beginning, flustered, his voice cracking halfway through the Hail Mary. You didn't think much of it then. Now it feels like a seed planted in someone else's mind, something that could sprout into danger. And here comes the quirky detail that still makes modern scholars raise their eyebrows. In a few scattered cases, women on trial for witchcraft were asked to prove they were not enchantresses by intentionally making themselves less attractive. That's right. If you washed off your makeup, if you wore any, cut your hair or wore rags, it might help. A kind of reverse makeover. If your beauty could be undone, maybe it wasn't supernatural after all. The problem is, it rarely worked. If you refused, they said you were proud and full of sin. If you complied, they said you were hiding something. It was a trap with no good exit. Your instincts start to shift. You keep your eyes down more. Wrap your shawl tighter. Avoid certain routes. You think about faking a limp, wearing ash on your cheeks to dull the glow. You wonder if being less of yourself might make you safer. The thought stings in a quiet, humiliating way. Not because you're vain, but because it means they've already taken something from you without lifting a finger. And then, one morning, the priest's assistant appears at your door with a message. Father Benedict would like to speak with you, privately. You stare at the boy. He doesn't meet your eyes. He just hands you the folded parchment, turns and walks away. Your fingers tremble as you open it. The ink is sharp, precise. The message is short. A time, a place, the chapel vestry. You sit down. The room is quiet. The mirror is still wrapped, the fire low. You think about Marin of Lubeck, about the compliments that were really accusations, about all the eyes that seem to be looking through you rather than at you. You have no idea what he wants to ask you, but you already know what he thinks. You arrive at the chapel early, which is either a brave decision or a foolish one. You're still not sure which. The sun is low, casting long streaks of gold across the stone walls, and the bells haven't rung yet for evening prayers. You take a deep breath, trying to slow the churn of your thoughts, and push open the heavy oak door. It creaks in protest, the sound echoing across the cold stone floor. The vestry is small, windowless, and smells of wax and dried herbs. There's a table draped in a faded linen cloth and shelves stacked with old prayer books, incense and brass candlesticks. Father Benedict is already there, standing with his back to you, hands clasped behind him, like he's preparing to sentence someone to penance. You close the door behind you quietly. "Thank you for coming," he says, without turning around. His voice is calm but clipped. You nod even though he can't see it. "Please," he gestures to the small wooden bench in front of the table. You sit. He turns, finally, and for a long moment he just looks at you. Not with lust, not with warmth, with analysis, like he's trying to figure out if you're the puzzle or the problem. "You've drawn attention," he says plainly. You feel your fingers curl into your skirt. "There are concerns." You don't answer. What could you say? "There are whispers about your influence," he continues, "on men, on households, on the minds of others." His eyes flicker toward the door as if someone might be listening. "Have you knowingly encouraged this?" And there it is, the question that's not really a question, a trap, disguised as curiosity. If you deny it too strongly, you'll sound defensive. If you say nothing, you'll sound guilty. Either way, he's already made up his mind. You shake your head slowly. "No, Father." He sighs as if disappointed in your lack of drama. "You must understand," he says. "In times like these, even unintended influence can be dangerous, especially when it leads others astray." That phrase, "times like these," is doing a lot of work. Plague still hangs in the air like a ghost. Food is scarce. Faith is fraying at the edges. People need something or someone to explain the chaos. And a beautiful woman walking calmly through the marketplace might as well be holding a torch to dry kindling. He moves to sit across from you. "There was a time," he says, "when beauty was seen as a reflection of divine grace. The Virgin Mary, after all, is often depicted as fair and radiant." His fingers trace a circle on the tabletop. But we live in fallen times now. Beauty is corrupted, weaponized. It tempts. It deceives. You can't help but notice the contradiction. If beauty once reflected heaven, why is it now considered a gateway to hell? That's one of the big, open debates scholars love to dive into. Where exactly the church's attitude toward beauty pivoted from divine gift to devil's tool. Some argue it was theological drift. Others blame post-plague hysteria, and some think it was a practical issue. Too many people blaming too many women for things no one understood. Regardless, here you are, sitting in a dark room being spoken to like your face is a loaded crossbow. I suggest, Father Benedict continues, that you begin to moderate your presence. The way he says it makes your skin crawl. Dress simply. Avoid unnecessary contact. No more singing even if you think no one can hear, and perhaps, he pauses, you might consider a devotional retreat and a time away from the village. Reflection. Prayer. Exile. That's what he's offering. A soft warning before the hard hand comes down. You feel a sudden wild urge to laugh, but you press your lips together. I haven't done anything, you whisper. That's not always the point, he says. And there it is. The most honest thing anyone said in weeks. He dismisses you gently, like a sheep from a flock, and you walk out into the gathering dusk, heart pounding in your chest. The air outside feels different, sharper. People pass you without greeting. The blacksmith's daughter turns her face away. You used to belong here. Now you're being carefully peeled from the picture, one glance at a time. That night you try to sleep, but your mind keeps rewinding the conversation over and over. You could leave, but where would you go? And if you stayed, how much would you have to erase yourself just to survive? Then you remember a story your grandmother once told you about a woman in a nearby village who was so beautiful that no man could resist her. She kept her head down, married early, wore grey wool, bore children without complaint. Still, when her neighbours' crops failed and her cousin's child died of fever, she was blamed. They said she'd cursed them in silence, with just her presence. They found her in the woods one day, barefoot, bleeding, with her hair cut off and her mouth sewn shut. You never asked if the story was true. You still don't want to know. In the early hours of morning, when the village is quiet and the shadows long, you sit before the trunk that holds your mirror. You unwrap it slowly. The silver is cold, the surface cloudy. You study your reflection, the same face you've had all your life, only now it feels like a threat. You think about smashing it, about pressing your thumb into the metal until your skin bruises, but you don't. Instead, you cover it again, because deep down you understand something now. It's not your beauty that's dangerous. It's what other people decide it means. Your hair becomes a problem next. Specifically the colour of it. It catches light like it has secrets, gold turning to flame at the edges, especially when the sun hits it just right. You've started braiding it tightly and tucking it under your veil, but still, it's the first thing people mention when they think they're being polite. Shame to hide such a crown, says the butcher's wife with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Looks just like the kind the witches wear in the tales. You try to laugh, you try to brush it off, but the comment sticks like a burr. And it isn't long before others echo the same strange compliment with the same sharp undertone. It's a colour that's rare in the village. Too rare. Rumour travels faster than the plague, and before long people are whispering that you must have fairy blood. That someone in your family must have danced under the wrong moon, or made an offering at the wrong stone. Beauty, you've come to learn, doesn't belong to you. It belongs to whoever's looking. And if they decide your hair means danger, it does. In medieval Europe, hair wasn't just hair, it was symbolism layered over centuries of folklore and fear. Golden hair, like yours, was prized in art, icons and noble portraits and tapestries, but in real life, it raised eyebrows. Blonde women were often associated with seduction, with moral weakness, with spells. There's even a documented case of a woman in Bohemia accused of luring a priest to sin simply because of her golden braid. He was found praying at her doorstep. She was found guilty of bewitchment. Historians still argue about whether these associations came from religious texts, folk stories, or the tension between church ideals and ancient pagan beauty standards. But wherever the source, the outcome was always the same. Women whose looks didn't match the social mould were mistrusted. And hair, of all things, was especially dangerous. You notice it happening to another girl too, Len. a servant in the manor house. She has thick black hair that she's always worn proudly in 2 long plaits, even though her station says she shouldn't. One morning she arrives at the well with it cut short and uneven, like it was hacked off with a dull blade. She won't meet your eye, won't answer when you ask, but the bruises on her arms tell you enough. There's this strange, cruel consensus that when beauty crosses class lines, it's especially threatening. Lena's hair made the lady of the manor nervous. Maybe the lord had been glancing too long. Maybe the lady had noticed. Maybe that was all it took. One too many looks, one too many smiles. And just like that, a servant becomes a problem. Your own position is more precarious. You're not noble, not quite common. Your father was a respected craftsman before he died. You live modestly but not poorly. That too is enough to make people uneasy. You don't have power, but you have proximity to it. Your beauty confuses the order of things. It gives you presence. And presence in a place like this is suspicious. A week after your meeting with Father Benedict, you find a scrap of parchment pinned to your door. No name, just a single line in rough ink. Cut your hair or we will. It isn't signed, but you don't need a signature. You recognise the script. Alice's brother, most likely, or one of the boys who loiter near the chapel. They've been watching you. You close the door, heart racing, and lean against the frame, gripping the handle until your knuckles go white. You're not angry. You're tired. Tired of trying to calculate every look, every step, every breath, and tired of wondering if tomorrow you'll be the newest cautionary tale for village girls. Don't get ideas, don't stand out, don't end up like her. There's a strange fringe belief recorded in a few old texts that women with magical hair could steal strength from others. The act of cutting it was seen as a way to disarm them. In some trials, this wasn't just symbolic, it was part of the process. Women accused of witchcraft had their hair sheared before questioning, like stripping a knight of his sword. It wasn't about truth, it was about control. You stare into the fire that night, scissors in hand, hair unbraided. You could cut it. Maybe it would help. Maybe it would make them stop looking, or maybe it would only prove their point, that your beauty is something to be feared, managed, contained. Instead, you braid it tighter, wind it into a knot and pin it beneath your veil. You won't give them that. Not yet. But the fear creeps in anyway. You sleep lightly now, flinching at every noise outside. You dream of shears slicing the air, of locks falling in clumps to the floor. In one dream, you're standing in the square surrounded by the entire village. They chant, not your name, just a sound, like the snipping of scissors. Snip, 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 and always, always, your golden hair pulling around your feet like a crime scene. By now, you don't walk the same paths you used to. You avoid gatherings, markets, anywhere people congregate and compare. But still, the fear follows you, like your reflection in the glassy puddles that form in the street. You see yourself and flinch, not because you don't recognise your own face, but because you do, and you know how dangerous that face has become. There's a story circulating now, a new one, that you were seen whispering to a cat at dusk, that your braid looked like a serpent, that you once smiled and the candle beside you blew out. You have no idea where these lies begin, but you know exactly where they're headed. Hair, beauty, presence, none of it belongs to you anymore. It belongs to the fear, and the fear is growing teeth. You're walking home from the baker's stall when you feel it. Eyes crawling across your back like cold fingers. The air has that heavy weight of a storm on its way, and the sky is the colour of wet ash. You pull your shawl tighter and keep walking, but the murmurs drift toward you anyway. Words carried on wind. Porcelain. Too pale. Doesn't look like she's ever worked a day. It's not the first time your skin's been a problem, but it hits different now. You didn't ask to have pale skin, it's just how you are. Your mother always said it was from your grandfather's side, the one with the Flemish traders. It burns easily in the sun and you've always been careful. But to the people in this village, that care now looks like arrogance. Like you think you're better, cleaner, untouched. You've become something unnatural by accident. In the Middle Ages, fair skin was complicated. Among the nobility, it was seen as a sign of high birth, an outward mark that you didn't have to labour in fields or scrub hearths. In art, saints and noble ladies were painted with skin like ivory, smooth and glowing. But in real life, if you had that kind of complexion and didn't come from a known noble family, it made people uncomfortable, because then it raised questions. Who are you trying to impress? who are you pretending to be? Your skin, you realise, has become its own kind of evidence. Not just of beauty, but of deception. People look at it and decide you must be hiding something, an enchanted powder, a secret lover, a pact sealed in moonlight. You laugh at the absurdity of them wit, quietly, bitterly. It's just a skin, it doesn't even tan properly. The irony is, women went to great lengths to get skin like yours. Well, some women. The ones who had access to things like powdered lead, vinegous washes and mercurial ointments. That's the fringe fact you can't stop thinking about. To achieve the fashionable pallor of the day, some women poison themselves slowly. Lead-based face creams, mercury-laced powders, aesthetic ambition with a death sentence. You've never worn a drop of it, but you've been accused of masking anyway. A passing washerwoman recently remarked that your skin was too even to be honest. You'd smiled politely and walked away, but the words followed you all the way home like smoke. The suspicion is getting louder now, thicker. It's in the way people greet you, short, flat, formal, and how they pause just a breath too long before blessing you when you sneeze. It's not fear yet, not fully, but it's growing roots. And then there's Anselm. He was always a little too friendly. The cooper's son, not particularly bright, but broad-shouldered and confident in that way some boys are when they've never been told no. He used to bring you flowers and niz, now he brings you rumours. At first it's small things, someone said you've got noble blood, or they think you keep secrets in that pretty head. And then, one day, he leans in too close and says, "They're saying you've got something in your veins, something not quite human." You pull away, stunned. He laughs like it's a joke, but he doesn't blink. You start checking your door twice at night. Bar it with an extra piece of wood. You pour water into the gaps in the frame to listen for voices on the other side. You think about hiding in the hills, about running, but where would you go? In this world, fair skin and fine features follow you like a scent. You can't outrun your own reflection. One of the strangest things about the accusations against beautiful women in this era was how often they blended moral suspicion with physical scrutiny. The way you looked became something to be judged not just aesthetically, but legally. Skin could be cited in court records, described in chilling detail. Her skin was like moonlight and her nature just as deceptive. That's a real description, written by a monk. Your neighbour starts avoiding you. His wife, who once traded herbs with you over the fence, now whispers with others instead. A group of girls giggle behind their hands when you pass, and you catch a glimpse of what they've drawn in the dirt. A figure with long hair, pale skin, a knife through the chest. Practice, they call it. We're playing trial. You walk away, heart pounding, and wonder if you should start burning your hair clippings, if someone might try to bury them or use them to prove your guilt. Folk magic, after all, was alive and well, and so were the people who believed in it. One day, a boy you barely know throws mud at you in the square. It lands on your veil, your sleeve. Everyone watches. No one speaks. You meet his eyes. He's afraid of you, but also proud of himself. Like he's testing whether the stories are true. You walk home with the mud drying on your clothes, jaw clenched so hard it hurts. You could clean it off, but you don't. You leave it there. Let them look. Let them see what they've made of you. That night you do something reckless. You light every candle in your room. You strip off your veil. You sit before your mirror, yes, the one you promised not to touch, and you stare at yourself for a long, long time. You don't look like a saint. You don't look like a witch. You just look like you. But in this village, that's the most dangerous thing you can be. You're in the manor hall, standing in front of a tapestry so old its threads have blurred into soft confusion. A scene of ancient gods and half-naked nymphs plays out in faded reds and blues, and no one seems to find it odd that the walls of a Christian household are decorated with stories of lust, betrayal, and divine beauty contests. The room smells like beeswax and old wool, and someone's dog is barking in the distance, as if it too knows something here doesn't add up. You've been summoned, not by the priest this time, but by Lady Avis, the local noblewoman, who's known more for her taste in imported fabrics than her actual piety. She greets you with a smile that's only polite on the surface. "My husband mentioned you," she says, as if that's a compliment. "He's taken notice of your glow." You say nothing. There is no safe way to respond. The room is full of subtle traps like this, compliments that come with consequences, invitations that feel like threats. This is how the noble courts operated, politics soaked in perfume, gossip folded into lace. And for a woman like you, too pretty, too visible, too conveniently close, this is not an honour, it's an ambush. Lady Avis pours wine into 2 goblets and hands you one without asking if you'd like it. Her gown glitters with little gold beads that catch the candlelight like stars caught in netting. She's dressed to win some silent competition, and maybe, in her eyes, she's already decided you're a rival. You remind me of Venus, she says, sipping her wine. But Venus always caused so many problems, didn't she? It's not a question, it's a warning. In medieval Europe, the classical world still haunted the imagination. The myths of Greece and Rome weren't forgotten. They were reframed, reinterpreted, and often held up as cautionary tales. Venus, Helen of Troy, Cleopatra, women of legendary beauty were portrayed not as heroes, but as harbingers of chaos. Their beauty toppled empires, seduced kings, started wars. So naturally, any woman in the real world who shared even a whisper of that lure was treated with suspicion, and sometimes with open hostility. There's a strange, half-serious theory that medieval women were punished not just for being beautiful, but for reminding people of ancient beauty. Of that pagan world the church was still trying to stamp out, you weren't just pretty, you were dangerous because your beauty made people remember. Remember that once power and sensuality and female presence weren't sins, they were divine. You wonder if Lady Avis believes this on some level. Her fingers toy with a velvet ribbon as she watches you. "You've never travelled, have you?" she asks. "No, my lady." She nods, almost pitying. Sometimes it's better not to be seen, especially by the wrong eyes. This is about her husband. Of course it is. He must have looked at you too long, or said your name in a way that stuck in her mind. And now you're in a room being told, very politely, not to exist so loudly. The dangerous favour of men in power. That's what really puts a target on your back. In courtly stories, the beautiful woman who captures a king's eye is either elevated or destroyed. Sometimes both. If she rises too fast, she becomes a threat. If she resists, she becomes a scapegoat. There is no right way to be admired. You nod when Lady Avis tells you to be careful. You agree when she suggests you might find more peace in seclusion. You don't argue when she offers you a little vial of something to dab behind your ears. Nothing harmful, just a calming scent. You know better than to refuse a gift that isn't really a gift. The vial smells like lavender and vinegar. You apply it once that night just to see. The scent clings to your skin like a second thought. You wonder how many other girls have been handed this same bottle. You wonder how many of them disappeared afterward. The truth is, noble women feared pretty commoners, not just because of jealousy, but because of proximity. You were too close to their world, close enough to disrupt the hierarchy, to become a mirror of what they once were or could never be. And mirrors, as you've learned, are dangerous things. You begin to walk a tighter line after that meeting. You avoid the manor as much as possible. You wear duller colours, pinch your cheeks less, walk with your head down, but it doesn't help. It never does. Word reaches you a few days later that the lady has had her maid dismissed. Rumour says the girl was listening at doors. You know better. The girl had a kind face, she brought you an apple once, now she's gone. You begin dreaming of Helen, of being on a ship, hair tangled by the wind, while men argue in foreign tongues. You wake with salt on your lips and the sense that your beauty is dragging you toward war. There's a portrait in the church, an old painting nearly faded to nothing, of a saint who looks suspiciously like Venus. She has golden hair and clear skin, and robes that cling too closely. No one talks about her. Her nameplate is gone. You stare at her sometimes, wondering what crime she committed that the church tried to paint over her story. You realise something quietly. It's not just that beauty is dangerous in this world. It's that beauty reminds people of power they no longer understand. Of gods and queens and stories where women weren't just silent wives or punished saints, where they were worshipped, where they mattered, and that scares them more than anything. The castle throws a feast, which is exactly as miserable as it sounds. There's a chill in the air, fire in the hearth, music plucked gently on a harp in the corner, and trays of food carried in by servants who keep their eyes low. You're here only because your presence was requested, summoned, really, by the lady of the manor herself. You didn't dare decline. So now you sit at the long side of the hall among a dozen other women, mostly noble, all dressed in silks and velvets and quiet suspicion. You are the only one not wearing jewellery. That absence says more about your place than a dozen titles ever could. You're not sure what role you're meant to play at this gathering. Entertainment, contrast, warning. The glances coming from across the table suggest a bit of all three. They smile, of course, they toast, they laugh at stories they've heard 100 times. But it's in the little silences between courses that the real theatre begins. One noble woman with a face like a raven's skull lifts her cup and says, "Some women must know how blessed they are to be born with such advantages." Another murmurs, "And how careful they must be not to let those gifts go to their heads or their beds." The table chuckles. All eyes flick to you, then back to their wine. You offer no reply. The most dangerous thing you could do here is act as if you belong. Court life, whether in castles or smaller noble households, was a blood sport played with fans, glances, and politely sharpened insults. And beauty? Beauty was ammunition. Yours is seen as an affront. You didn't earn it with rank or riches. You didn't inherit it from a duchess grandmother or foreign queen. You simply have it, and that makes it feel to them like theft. You're seated next to Lady Isolde, a sharp-eyed woman rumoured to have poisoned 2 sisters for daring to wear a more flattering cut of sleeve. Her jewellery is absurd. Amethyst earrings so large they tug her ears into little stretched crescents. She leans toward you at one point and whispers, "Pretty girls like you tend to burn bright but briefly. Take care not to be too noticed." She says it like advice, like she's helping, but there's no help here. In medieval courts, beauty was currency, but only when used within strict, unwritten rules. If you were noble, your beauty could be paraded, painted, composed into a song. If you were not, it had to be managed, acknowledged only in passing, always with a hint of danger, like a knife wrapped in silk. The men in the room do their part too. They glance at you with amusement or vague hunger, the way one might eye a rare falcon, pretty, exotic, better in a cage. Lord Humbert, the host, catches your eye once and holds it a beat too long. His wife sees it. Her smile doesn't break. You excuse yourself before dessert. As you walk back through the corridor, your slippered feet echo on the cold stone. The walls are hung with portraits, noble ladies with perfect faces and 2 smooth eyes. You pause before one. The nameplate reads, Lady Eleanor, disgraced. There's no date, no story, just that word and disgraced. It hangs heavier than the tapestries. There's an old tale told by servant girls about Lady Eleanor, that she was once the most beautiful woman in the county, that she danced with a visiting prince and laughed too freely, that within a week she was locked in her chambers, accused of bewitching him. She died mysteriously. Some say poison, others say heartbreak. Her portrait stayed, but the name faded. As you stare at her painted eyes, you realise something you hadn't understood before. The women here don't fear your beauty because they're jealous. They fear it because it reminds them of how quickly favour turns to ruin. Later, back in your room, you stare at your own reflection in the basin water. You try to imagine what they see when they look at you. Do they see a seductress? A threat to their status? A girl too confident in her skin? Or just a convenient distraction from their own quiet miseries? That's the fringe truth most miss about these noble women. Their lives weren't fairy tales. They were constricted by duty, silenced by custom, flattened by expectation. Beauty for them was a brief advantage, until it became a threat. And when it did, they turned against it wherever they found it. Even, especially, when it wore another woman's face. The days after the feast bring a change. People begin treating you not just with suspicion, but with strategic distance. Servants avoid your eye. The steward forgets to bring you firewood. Your name, once whispered in curiosity, now floats like ash on the air, something burnt already. One morning a child runs past you and says, "Mama says you're a fairy in disguise." You smile weakly, but inside your stomach knots. The old stories never end well for fairies. They're chased out, tricked, drowned in wells. Fairies never last. That's how you know the tide is turning. You've stopped being a person. You've become a story. And in this world, stories don't protect you. They devour you. The king arrives 2 weeks later, and with him comes the kind of chaos only royalty can summon. Mud churned to filth by the hooves of overfed horses, cooks sweating through their linen shifts, and nobles arriving with trunks full of furs and grievances. No one in your village really expected him to come through this remote patch of land. But there he is, His Majesty Richard, lean and alert, with a reputation for erratic moods and a taste for novelty. And you are the exact kind of novelty that causes trouble. You're warned before he arrives, of course. Father Benedict advises all unmarried women to stay indoors during the royal procession, for modesty, he says, and to avoid any misunderstanding. You hear him mutter something about undue attention and temptation as he speaks. You don't miss the way he looks directly at you while saying it. You try to obey, you keep your door shut, you light no candles, you pretend for a few hours to be invisible. It doesn't work. You're spotted anyway, peeking through a crack in the shutters like a curious ghost. Maybe it was your hair, maybe just the light hitting your cheek at the wrong moment. But the next day, a steward arrives at your door with a summons. The king wishes to meet the girl with the face of a saint. You almost laugh. Almost. But then you look at the man's face and there's no mirth there. Just expectation. You can't refuse. You don't refuse. Refusal isn't one of the options, so you go. The castle is a blur of motion. Pages and guards and merchants clamour through the stone halls like a hive preparing for winter. You're led into a solar lit by slanted beams of late sun, where King Richard sits beside a table crowded with maps, wine, and half-forgotten tokens from previous visits. A carved fox, a silk ribbon, a jewelled comb. He's young, too young to carry the kind of authority he does, but it rests on him anyway, like a heavy cloak no one dares lift. He sees you and smiles. It's not cruel, but it's not innocent either. "Ah," he says, "there she is." The steward bows and backs out. You curtsy, low and silent. Your heart pounds in your ears. The king gestures for you to rise. "What's your name?" You tell him. Your voice is steady, barely. He studies you. "Has anyone ever told you," he says, "that you look like a Botticelli painting come to life?" You blink, trying to decide if that's a compliment or a trap. You've never seen a painting. You're not even sure who Botticelli is, but you nod. "Only in jest, my lord." He laughs, genuinely amused. "Charming." He offers you wine. You decline. He raises an eyebrow but doesn't press. Instead, he asks questions. Soft ones, slippery with implication. "Do you sing? Do you dance? Are you married?" "No, no, and no. Your refusals are small shields, flimsy but fast." He leans closer, elbow on the table. "You're very still. Are you frightened?" "Yes." "No." He smiles again. "Then you're smarter than most." You understand this moment, even as you sit inside it. This is the dangerous favour of kings. One glance too long, one phrase said in jest, one whispered comparison to a painting or a goddess or a dream. That's all it takes. One wrong word and you're no longer someone. You're a symbol, a thing to be admired, possessed, destroyed. In medieval courts, kings often believed their attentions were blessings, that a look or touch from them elevated women, regardless of whether the women wanted it. And those women, especially those of lower rank, knew the game all too well. If you welcomed his favour, you were ambitious, possibly sinful. If you refused it, you were proud, possibly seditious. Either way, your fate was sealed by how well you walked the tightrope. There's a fringe account about a woman named Ismena of Rouen. She was noticed by a visiting monarch for her elegant neck and obedient manner. For 3 days he called her his moonlight muse. On the 4th day she was sent to a convent. No one ever explained why. You leave the solar unharmed, but shaken. The king didn't touch you, didn't promise anything. But you know that the entire household saw you enter that room, and saw you leave. The eyes start tracking you differently after that. Lady Avis avoids you altogether now, and her ladies follow suit. One of the cooks mutters a prayer as you pass. A visiting squire bows to you too deeply, then apologises like he's touched hot iron. Even the pages whisper when they think you're not listening. You've become a story again. This time not the dangerous village beauty, but the king's fascination. A girl with too much face and not enough status. A flame in the wind, and everyone knows how that ends. You think about Ismena, about Botticelli, about Helen, about all the women who were once admired until admiration turned sour. There's a long line behind you now, a ghostly procession of loveliness punished simply for being noticed. And here's the open scholarly debate that twists the knife a little deeper. Was the danger of royal attention rooted in power imbalances, or was it the societal backlash that came after? Some argue that kings rarely followed through, that many women were untouched physically but ruined reputationally. Others believe the attention itself was a kind of violence. The truth likely lives somewhere in between. That night you stand in front of your mirror again, though you know you shouldn't. You stare at yourself, at the girl who's now been noticed by a king and watched by a village and envied by a noblewoman. You try to see what they see. You don't. To you it's just your face, familiar, tired, framed by hair that used to be a comfort and is now a liability, skin that glows too easily, eyes that hold too many secrets. You whisper just once, "I didn't ask for this." But the mirror doesn't answer. The attention from the king doesn't linger as long as the suspicion it leaves behind. He and his entourage move on within the week, off to another estate, another hunt, another feast where some other girl might be told she resembles a painting she's never seen. But you stay, and so do the stares. At first you think the worst of it might be over. He didn't ask you to come with him. He didn't leave you with child, title or coin. The visit, for all its tension, was brief, forgettable, but the villagers don't forget. They remember everything that's been said about you, and now they've added a new layer. She caught a king's eye. That fact alone, true or not, is enough to tilt the balance even further against you. You've stepped, however unintentionally, into the role of a woman who used her beauty to climb. And there's nothing the medieval world hates more than a woman who climbs. The change is subtle at first. A loaf of bread costs you more than it used to. The herb wife doesn't sell you rue anymore, saying she's run out, though her baskets are full. Children are called away when you pass. A line of laundry once hung across a courtyard is pulled down early, just so you don't get a good look at someone's finer linens. They're closing ranks, not openly, not violently, just enough to make your world smaller by the hour. You've become what they fear most, an exile. If a woman like you, lowborn, unmarried, and inconveniently radiant, can draw the gaze of royalty, what does that mean for the rest of the hierarchy? What does it mean for their daughters, their wives, their illusions? Even the priest stops mentioning you by name in sermons, but the parables shift. Suddenly, there are more cautionary tales about Jezebel, more reminders about Delilah and the dangers of women who wear beauty like armour. There's a story he tells one Sunday, with thick emphasis on certain words, about a woman so lovely that a nobleman was moved to folly. The woman, the story goes, was burned, not because she bewitched him, but because her beauty made the mistake easier. The moral is clear. Sometimes your face is aflame, and you're the one holding the torch. You begin to notice the women who once pitied you have started to blame you instead. At market, two women speak just loud enough for you to hear. She knew what she was doing. They always do. She probably wanted him to look. You tighten your shawl and keep walking. This is where the myth of beauty as social climbing starts to rot from the inside. It pretends to be a compliment. Look at her. She's irresistible. She's clever. She knows how to use what she has. But it's just another form of punishment. It assumes intention where there was none. It paints your survival tactics as seduction. It frames your mere presence as manipulation. And in the court of public opinion, that's all they need to justify turning on you. You hear whispers that your family, what's left of them, have been questioned. That your father's workshop, abandoned since his death, has been searched for items of unnatural significance. Someone says they found a dried poppy flower in a jar. Someone else says it was a charm. You know better. It was part of your mother's herbal kit, probably 30 years old. But they're not looking for truth. They're looking for reason. Reason to explain the way the king looked at you. Reason to keep their daughters safe. Reason to keep the world ordered and still. And the easiest reason is always the woman who doesn't fit. One afternoon you're walking back from the stream when a stone hits the ground near your feet. Just one, small and sharp, you turn but no one's there. Then another. A giggle, someone running. You find a mark on your shoulder later, blue and swollen. You don't tell anyone. You already know how that ends. Even the house where you rent your small room feels colder. The matron watches you now in that slow, abjuring way. She tells you not to leave water out overnight, says it invites things. The milk goes sour. You catch her giving you the side eye when it does. You could leave, try to disappear into another village, cut your hair, change your name, but there's a dark weight in your stomach that tells you it won't matter. Your beauty arrives before you. It walks into rooms before your body does. It lingers long after you leave. There's a fringe theory among historians that beauty, particularly in women without power, was considered a kind of unlicensed influence, something threatening because it couldn't be controlled by law, church, or marriage. It was free-floating power, and free-floating power was always suspect. You weren't supposed to have sway over men without a title to justify it. which is why after the king leaves and you stay behind, you become less of a curiosity and more of a danger. One day, a man stops you near the chapel. He's from another village, passing through, but he's heard the stories. He asks if you really drew the king's favour. You tell him no. He grins, leans closer, says, "Maybe you could show me what made him look." His hand brushes your sleeve. You freeze. And that's when you know the real problem isn't the king's attention. It's the ripple effect it leaves behind. You weren't kissed, crowned, or taken away, but you were seen. And that alone marked you as fair game. Later, in your room, you rub the spot on your arm where he touched you. It burns, not with pain, but with the memory of being made into someone else's fantasy. You stare into the basin, at your own reflection rippling in the water. There's no power in this beauty, no protection, no promise, just a face that's been seen one time too many. The monks start writing about you, not in letters, not in reports, but in little marginal notes. Strange, cautious things tucked into the corners of copied texts. Your name isn't used, of course. You're referred to obliquely as the radiant one near the western path, or she of the soft gaze and suspect favour. You learn this by accident, overhearing two novices whispering in the apothecary garden. They're not discreet. They say it like a riddle, a bit of monastery gossip wrapped in half-scholarly awe. At first, it's almost amusing. You imagine yourself as a medieval footnote someone mentioned in the margins while the rest of the secular world argues about saints and politics. But then you realise what it means. It means your presence has wormed its way into the cloistered thoughts of men who are meant to renounce such things. You've become their disruption, their failure of focus. And they're writing it down. You start to notice changes. The older monks keep their distance, but a few of the younger ones linger near the edge of the chapel when you walk past. One, Brother Alric, gives you that look. That searching, self-punishing look of someone who thinks he's supposed to save you from yourself, or maybe from himself. He stares too long during Mass, and once, in the garden, he approaches you with an offer to pray together for clarity. You politely decline. He doesn't speak to you again, but 3 days later you find a strip of parchment folded under a stone outside your door. It's a verse about temptation, about a woman whose eyes reflect the divine, but call the sinful forward. It's unsigned, but the ink is fresh and you recognise the hesitant hand. You burn it without reading the second line. In monasteries, beauty wasn't supposed to exist, at least not in any literal way. Monks and nuns were trained to deny the flesh, to look inward, to fix their eyes on heaven. But beauty still crept in, through stained glass, illuminated manuscripts, and sometimes through the garden gate wearing a veil and spumach moonlight. There are real historical accounts of monastics writing down dreams they had about village girls. Not lustful dreams, necessarily, but symbolic ones. Visions of purity turn to threat, faces becoming flames, beauty leading them to cliffs. You realise that the notes in the margins, the ones about you, are not really about you, they're about them, their guilt, their discomfort, their inability to reconcile holiness with attraction. And like everything else in your world, it's easier for them to blame the woman than question the system. The nuns aren't much better. You meet Sister Edith one afternoon when delivering a basket of salves to the abbey. She's older, silver-haired, with eyes sharp as flint. She watches you the entire time you speak, then says, "The Lord gives all women a gift, the wise ones use theirs quietly." You're not sure whether that's advice or condemnation. She invites you into the cloister garden for tea. The conversation is tense but polite. She asks about your family, your prayers, your thoughts on humility. You answer carefully. She nods often. Finally she says, "Beauty is a test. God gave you a difficult one." You don't argue. What would be the point? There's a fringe belief, still whispered among the more mystical orders, that beauty was not just a gift or a temptation, but a divine burden. Something bestowed to challenge the soul of the beholder and the possessor. If you were beautiful and humble, you passed the test. If you were beautiful and noticed, you failed. So that's what you are now, a test other people keep failing, and for that you're punished. You begin keeping your hair bound tighter than ever, pulled back until your scalp aches. You wear darker dresses, heavier shawls. You even skip communion 1 week just to avoid the stares. But none of it makes a difference, because once they've decided you're dangerous, anything you do becomes suspicious. You think of another girl from years ago, Alina, the shepherd's niece. She had a voice like sunlight on water. Sang during planting season. Everyone loved it. Until one spring, when the rains didn't come, and her singing suddenly felt wrong, she stopped. But that wasn't enough. She vanished not long after. Married off to a cousin in the north, they said. You never saw her again. Now you start to wonder if she'd ever even left. Your dreams begin to twist. You see the monastery walls rising like a cage. Hear Brother Alric's voice echoing, not in prayer, but in accusation. You dream of parchment soaked in ink and blood, of your name scrawled into margins and then crossed out. One night you wake from a dream in which your reflection was writing back to you in mirror script. It said only this: they will say it was your fault. You sit up in bed, heart pounding, and realise how far this has gone. You haven't done anything, and yet you're being recorded, defined by others, in sermons, in rumours, in monastic notes no one will read for 100 years, but that will still exist long after your bones are gone. And maybe that's the cruelest part. They won't remember your voice, your thoughts, your fear. They'll remember your funnel face. You find the vial in your basket the day after the monastery visit. Glass, cloudy, is stoppered with wax and tucked between bundles of dried thyme and rosemary like it simply belonged there. At first you think it's another of Lady Avice's subtle little threats, but the wax bears no seal. The handwriting on the label is spidery and unadorned. Powder of St. Agnes for complexion and calm. You stare at it for a long moment, not sure whether to laugh or be afraid. You didn't ask for this. You didn't buy it. And yet here it is, something meant to fix a problem you never agreed was broken. You sniff the vial cautiously. It smells of crushed rose petals and vinegar, with a sour edge that curls your nose. You've heard of this stuff before, mentioned by women in hushed tones, often followed by horror stories. It was supposed to soothe the skin, and even the tone, calm the nerves, especially those of women too noticed for their own good. A blend of herbs, minerals, and, if you believe the gossip, a whisper of ground pearl or powdered bone. You put it back in the basket and push it deep beneath a pile of linens, but just knowing it's there makes your skin itch. Medieval beauty rituals were an odd blend of hope and fear. Women mixed homemade pastes from white lead, arsenic, mercury, and other delightful ingredients, convinced these would soften their faces into the kind of pale elegance saints seem to wear so effortlessly. But behind each recipe was a warning. Don't use too much, don't apply too often, don't let anyone see, because once you started trying to maintain your beauty, people stopped seeing you as natural. You became manipulative, artificial, suspicious. It was a terrible catch-22. Be beautiful and unblemished, but don't work for it. Glow with youth, but age gracefully. Be effortlessly lovely, but make sure no one catches you trying. You remember your mother once burning the tips of your lashes with a candle to make them curl. Just the very ends, she whispered. Don't move. You sat still as stone, the warmth tickling your lids, her breath sweet with fennel. She told you it would make your eyes look bigger, brighter, but you were too young to understand why that mattered. Now you do. It's never really been about the beauty itself. It's about control, powder, perfume, paint. They all walk the line between care and deceit. To look too good is to be accused of sorcery. To wear a scent too sweet is to invite suspicion of poison. The line between cosmetics and concoction has never been clean. In some towns it's illegal for unmarried women to wear certain oils or powders. In others it's simply understood. If you do, and something goes wrong, a crop failure, a stillborn birth, a man's sudden illness, it will be your fault. You've seen it happen before. A woman named Maëlle once sold rosewater infused with saffron, claiming it helped with dryness and kept away winter spirits. Her skin was flawless. Her business thrived. Until one winter, the steward's wife miscarried, and someone saw Maëlle's bottle on her shelf. The conclusion was swift. Her cart was overturned. Her bottles smashed. She was gone by morning. No one asked where. There's a fringe belief, half folklore, half church paranoia, that certain beauty rituals were actually disguised incantations. That by stirring certain powders in a circle, or applying salve to mirror-glass skin, women were casting passive enchantments. It was nonsense, of course, but nonsense has weight when it's passed from mouth to mouth like gospel. You dream about that vial again, about the powder pouring out like smoke and clinging to your skin, coating it like frost, making you untouchable. You wake feeling hollow, as if your face is no longer your own. Still, the temptation lingers. The lines under your eyes have deepened. You've stopped smiling unless you must. You sleep less, your face has become a mask, and yet even that isn't enough. You think just once, what if I did use it? Would they like me more? Fear me less? Would the girls stop whispering and the men stop staring like I've already devoured them? The day you finally open the vial, it's raining. The sky is grey and the hearth refuses to catch. You sit at your table with the little glass bottle, rolling it between your fingers. You dab a bit on your fingertip, hesitating before brushing it beneath your jaw where no one will see. The powder is cool, it tingles faintly, and for a moment you feel something shift. Not your skin, but your breath. Like the act itself has changed you. You check the mirror later. You don't look different, but you feel different. And that's the trap. The next time you go to market, 3 women refuse to serve you. One mutters something about covering lies with flour. Another just says, she's not what she was. You wonder how they can tell. Maybe they can't. Maybe they're just looking harder now, watching you more closely, convinced that every flick of your sleeve hides a curse. You leave your herbs behind that day. You go home empty-handed. Later you throw the vial into the fire. It hisses, curls, and releases a faintly sweet scent before the glass shatters. You tell yourself it wasn't working, that you only tried it out of curiosity, but part of you knows it wasn't about appearance, it was about agency, and even that small taste of control made them notice more, not less. That's the cruelest part. You can't win. If you use nothing, your beauty is unnatural. If you use something, it's suspicious. If you embrace it, you're seducing, and if you hide it, you're plotting. You realise, slowly, painfully, that what they want is for you to be beautiful, but not in a way that costs them anything. Not attention, not desire, and certainly not power. And now that it has, you're just one more powdered face on the edge of accusation. You start wearing the veil every day now, not just to mass or when travelling through the village, but from the moment you wake to the moment you fall into bed. You even sleep with it nearby, just in case someone decides to drop by unannounced. It's become your shield. Not because it hides everything, it doesn't, but because it tells a story. I am modest. I am quiet. I am not dangerous. You hope the veil will say these things for you, louder than your mouth ever could. It doesn't work, of course it doesn't. People still stare, still whisper, and now they add something new to their repertoire of gossip. Why does she wear the veil so tightly? What's she hiding now? This is the twisted genius of medieval social logic. Anything you do to protect yourself becomes further evidence of guilt. Smile too much? You're manipulative. Smile too little? You're scheming. Walk confidently? You're flaunting yourself. Walk quickly with your head down? You've got something to run from. It's a loop, and you're tied in the middle of it like a knot everyone pulls tighter every day. The veil itself isn't a new fashion. Married women wear them. Widows. Even some unmarried girls, especially the ones considered devout. The church encourages it after all. Modesty, modesty, modesty. Hair is temptation, hair is pride, hair is where sin begins. There are old records of councils where bishops debated the proper veil length, as if sin were measured in inches. Too short and it's a tease, too long and it's vanity. Somewhere in between is salvation, or at least survival. You walk past a pair of monks in town and one mutters, "She wraps herself like a widow, but no husband died." The other just nods. You don't stop walking. You're tired of fighting stories you didn't write. There's something absurdly medieval about all of it. How much power they believe is stored in your appearance. How much magic they think lives in your skin, your hair, your eyes. Some even claim you've cursed yourself by hiding what God gave you. Others say the veil is enchanted, that it conceals a mark of the devil. You wish you could laugh, but the weight of the cloth on your head makes it hard. One afternoon a child pulls at your veil while you're bent at the well, nearly tugging it loose. His mother snatches him away with a hiss, not at him, but at you. He's just a boy. Don't tempt him. You spend the rest of the day with your heart lodged in your throat because you realise that your body, even covered, is now seen as an invitation. There's a long-standing debate among scholars, still rattling through dusty seminar rooms centuries later, about whether these veils were ever really about religion at all. Some argue that they were never meant to protect women's purity, but to protect men from their own failings. Others say they were tools of control, modesty manufactured and enforced like any other tax or law. But the lived reality is simpler and darker. The veil is not about you. It's about their comfort, their vision of what a woman should be, especially a beautiful one. The worst part is, it's working. You've stopped singing. You don't visit the stream anymore. You skip market days. Your world is shrinking into a circle of shadows wrapped tightly around your face. You meet Alice again, the first real conversation you've had in weeks. She stands stiffly on your doorstep, eyes flicking to your covered head and then away. She doesn't step inside. You look like a ghost, she says. You try to smile. Maybe that's safer. She nods but doesn't laugh. They're saying you don't speak because your tongue was stolen by a demon, or you sold it. She pauses. Or you offered it to the king. There's so much packed into those sentences, as you almost choke on the silence. But then she sighs, softer, and reaches into her cloak, pulling out a pale linen square. My mother embroidered this when I came of age. I want you to have it. You take it with shaking hands. It's nothing elaborate, just a stitched vine along the edge, but the gift is real and rare. A small truce in a war you never declared. That night you sew it into your veil. You wear it not just for modesty, but for memory. Proof that someone still sees ye, that you haven't disappeared completely beneath the cloth. But even with the veil, you know people are watching, judging, imagining, because a hidden face is a canvas for other people's fears, and your veil has become a blank surface for all their darkest thoughts. A week later, a priest from another village stops by. He speaks in riddles, saying he's here to offer guidance to those in spiritual danger. He looks at you the entire time. Father Benedict stands beside him, silent but pleased. You're not invited into the church. You're told to listen, to be open to instruction. The sermon is about pride that hides itself, serpents under silk, Eve cloaked in lambskin. They don't need to name you anymore. Everyone already knows. And so the veil, meant to shield you, becomes your cage. A woman named Tilda once wore a veil like yours decades ago. You remember the story now. She was quiet, devout, always seen with her head covered. When her husband fell sick, they said she had bewitched him, poisoned him with kisses he never asked for. When she cried in court, they said it was vanity mourning its own downfall. Her veil was used to bind her hands when they burned her. You stare into the mirror, veil wrapped tight, and think about Tilda, about how no amount of covering can protect you from people who've already decided you're to blame. And that's when you realise they don't want you invisible, they want you erased. You start going to mass earlier now, before the bells, before the crowd, so you can kneel alone in the shadows and leave before anyone has time to make a scene of your presence. You sit near the back, in the pew by the draughty wall where the candles flicker sideways and the incense curls lazily toward the rafters. From here the altar looks distant, like a separate world, a better one maybe. The saints carved into the walls stare down with blank, smooth eyes. Most of them are men. The few women, Mary, Cecilia, Catherine, are small and pale, always looking away, always quiet. You try to mimic them. You kneel, you murmur prayers, you bow your head. You do everything a good woman is supposed to do, but it's never enough. A boy walks past you one morning and mutters, "Too pretty to pray that hard." Another woman gives you a sidelong glance and doesn't even bother to whisper. Doesn't matter what she says, God sees through makeup. You're not wearing any, but that doesn't matter. Once people have decided that beauty is a sin, even your clean face is a mask. Even your statements is screaming. The church loves saints. But it especially loves saints who suffered, saints who were disfigured, saints who died young, saints who bled for their virtue. Female saints were often praised not for their beauty, but for their refusal to let that beauty be touched. Lucy, who tore out her own eyes. Agatha, who had her breasts cut off. Margaret, who was swallowed by a dragon and slashed her way out with a cross. These women didn't just preserve their purity, they paid for it in pain. You're beginning to understand that suffering is the only kind of beauty this world will tolerate. There's a scholarly debate about how medieval people saw holiness in relation to physical form. Was ugliness a sign of spiritual strength, or was beauty acceptable only if it was passive, something endured, not celebrated? Some theologians believed that truly holy women would become less beautiful over time, their outward form dimming as their souls shone brighter. If you remained beautiful, they reasoned, you must be clinging to earthly pride. So now, when people see you still wearing the same soft face, they assume it means you haven't suffered enough. You try desperately to seem diminished. You stop brushing your hair. You wear the same dark gown every day. You speak only when spoken to. You pretend not to notice when men speak over you, when women glare. and the priest prays a little louder when you're nearby. Still, nothing helps. One day, Sister Edith stops you as you leave the chapel. Her hand is gentle on your arm, but her voice is not. "I knew a girl like you," she says, a face like spring. Every man thought he was in love with her. She prayed harder than any of us, but it didn't matter. The other sisters made sure she left. You meet her eyes. Did she leave willingly? Edith pauses. No one leaves willingly when they don't understand the danger they carry. She lets you go. The sound of her sandals fades down the stone steps, but her words stay. You carry them with you. There's a story you hear one evening at the edge of the forest, from a travelling friar who's made camp by the road. He says it like it's a parable, but there's no real lesson at the end, just dread. A girl too beautiful to live among her people fled into the mountains and lived in a cave. They say her reflection in the river turned men mad. But mothers prayed to her out of fear, not devotion. That her bones when she died were white as alabaster and refused to decay. The friar laughs when he tells it. Says it's just an old tale, a superstition. But the way he looks at you afterward makes your skin crawl. You wonder, for the first time, if you are cursed. If maybe something clings to you, some unlucky charm passed down through your blood. Your grandmother was rumoured to have had that look. Your mother too, though she dulled it with time and hardship. Maybe this beauty isn't a gift, maybe it's a slow-acting poison. You begin to imagine cutting it away, not just your hair, but all the parts of you that draw eyes, your lashes, your lips, the curve of your neck. You imagine scraping the soft from your face until only bone remains. Would that be enough? Would they finally see you as holy if there was nothing left to love? But you don't do it. Not yet. You still want to believe that your body is yours, that your face doesn't belong to the world, that beauty doesn't have to be dangerous. You start praying harder, not for protection, but for transformation. You ask to be made invisible, to fade like morning mist, to become plain, forgettable, safe. The candles in the chapel sputter, but they don't answer. The saints don't speak, and the people around you keep measuring your value in looks they pretend not to give. You pass a woman in the street, one of the older widows, stern and sharp. She says, "If you were serious about salvation, you'd cover your face completely." You don't respond. You don't have to, because now you understand that nothing will ever be enough. Not silence, not modesty, not prayer, not even sainthood. You're sitting by the hearth mending a tear in your sleeve when the knock comes. 3 sharp raps, like a drumbeat. Not urgent, not panicked, calculated. You already know who it is before you open the door. The village deacon stands outside, holding something in his arms that gleams even in the dull morning light. It's a mirror. Not glass, those are rare and foreign, but polished metal, shaped into a shallow dish, cool and silvery. It looks like it came from a cathedral treasury or the bottom of some lord's trunk. The deacon doesn't speak at first, he just holds it out. You hesitate. "What is this?" "It was found outside the chapel," he says. "We're told it may have belonged to you. It doesn't. You haven't owned a mirror in weeks. The one you once kept, your little piece of vanity wrapped in cloth, was hidden away and then broken. But you take the thing from his hands anyway, because something in his tone tells you refusal would be suspicious. The mirror is cold and heavy, as though it remembers other hands, other rooms. We assume," he continues carefully, "that you refrain from using it. There are concerns. Concerns. A word that now means guilt without proof. There's an old superstition creeping back into people's mouths lately, that mirrors are portals, not just reflections of the self, but windows to something darker. Demons, vanity, hidden sins. Some believe that when you stare too long at your own image, something else might look back. You nod slowly, say nothing, and close the door. You don't mean to keep the mirror. You plan to return it, or maybe bury it in the garden. But instead, you sit down and place it on the table. The metal surface holds a warped image, your face elongated, stretched, faint. You look like a ghost in it, a smear of eyes and shadow. And yet, even now, there's a part of you that wants to believe the mirror might speak some truth. That it might reveal the flaw everyone else sees. The devil's mark. The seduction. The pride. Whatever it is they've convinced themselves you carry like a hidden weapon. You lean closer. Nothing moves. Just your own face staring back, tired and pale. Mirrors have long been troublemakers in church teachings. They're instruments of vanity, gateways to pride. Some monasteries banned them entirely. Certain orders of nuns swore never to look upon their own reflection. There were whispers that witches used mirrors to cast illusions, to twist their faces into forms too alluring to resist. You remember a sermon once long ago when the priest described Lucifer as the most beautiful angel, and how that beauty was part of his fall. Maybe that's the lesson. Beauty without humility becomes a trap, even for angels. Later that day you catch a girl from the village watching you as you pass her cottage. She doesn't smile, doesn't speak, just stares. In her lap is a broken piece of glass, half buried in her skirt. She's using it like a mirror, tilting it toward the sun, catching her reflection in flashes. She sees you watching her and quickly tucks it away. The next morning she's at confession. You hear the whispers. She was imitating her, trying to look like her. Your name isn't said, but it echoes anyway. That's when the real fear begins. You're not just seen as dangerous anymore, you're becoming contagious. People think their daughters might catch your face, like a sickness, that a glance in your direction might warp their futures, that you've become a mirror of the wrong kind, one that doesn't just reflect, but distorts. The paranoia turns practical. Mirrors are banned from the chapel entirely. One is shattered by a group of boys who say it made them feel strange. The blacksmith covers his polished shields with cloth. A woman throws her comb into the fire. You walk past these scenes like a figure from a painting that's gone too long untouched, suddenly come to life. One day you find a scrap of parchment tacked to the chapel door. A drawing not well done but close enough. It's a face like yours, eyes hollowed, lips twisted, hair coiled like a serpent. Below it, the mirror witch. The parchment is gone the next day. No one claims to have seen it. But now, when children see you, they press their hands over their eyes. That evening you dig a hole in the earth behind your cottage. It's shallow and angry. You place the mirror inside, press your foot on it until it cracks, and cover it with dirt. But it doesn't matter. The story has already surfaced. You've been linked with the object, with reflection, with pride, with danger. There's a curious theory that still floats around the more obscure corners of medieval scholarship, half myth, half psychology, that women who looked in mirrors too often were at risk of creating doubles, that their reflection could become autonomous. A second self, more beautiful, more brazen, untethered from conscience. And if that double slipped into the world, it was said, it would commit sins the original could not. You wonder if that's what people think you are now, a beautiful sin loosed from a mirror. You wrap your veil tighter the next day, speak even less. But it doesn't matter. You know how this ends, with glass on the ground and a woman blamed for looking. The accusations begin to show up in court records. Not formal charges, not yet, but questions, notes, hesitations. Witnesses claim she attracts undue attention. Observed using unnatural powders. Has been linked to strange behaviour in others. You don't see these yourself, of course. They're not shared with you. They're whispered between clerks and copied carefully into margins, waiting for someone braver or more ambitious to make them real. This is how it starts. Not with a trial, but with a whisper that lands on parchment like a drop of oil, spreading outward, leaving a stain. You hear from the tailor's daughter that someone mentioned your name at a meeting of the bishop's advisers. Only as an example, she says quickly, eyes wide. Not a formal concern. But concern in this place doesn't need formality. It only needs fuel. And beauty, especially yours, makes for the most flammable kind. The church has always kept quiet records of the accused. Sometimes names are scribbled on wax tablets, later erased or rewritten. Sometimes full testimonies are collected, unsigned, to be saved for later. Sometimes a woman's face is described in obsessive detail, the curve of her cheekbone, the light of her skin, the colour of her eyes, without her name ever appearing at all. As if the face alone were proof of something sinister. You've become one of those descriptions now. There's a strange case, recorded in a dusty ledger from Provence, of a woman named Elira, whose only real crime was being too beautiful at the wrong time. She was described as having eyes like deep wells, and a mouth that summoned thought. No mention of magic, no confession of sorcery, just a list of how others felt when they looked at her. The record ends abruptly with a short line, judged compelling beyond natural law, removed. Removed. That's how they phrase it when they don't want to admit what really happened. You find yourself catalogued in smaller ways too. People begin to count your appearances, They mark your absences. They say things like, "She wasn't at market yesterday, but the wind turned strange," or "She passed by the well just before the child fell ill." You become a pattern, a shape in the background of other people's misfortunes. And patterns, in a world ruled by fear and ritual, are always dangerous. It doesn't matter that you've done nothing, because in this society beauty itself is evidence. The laws aren't designed to name it as such, not openly, but in practice it seeps into every part of the process. Court scribes notice when women are too clean, too composed, too bright-eyed under questioning. They use phrases like unearthly grace or face untouched by care. When those words appear in the record, everyone knows what it means. She was too lovely to be innocent. You hear from the baker's son, nervous and fidgety, that a man from the next village was asked whether you'd ever looked at him strangely. He said yes, and that now his dreams are troubled. He didn't accuse you outright, but the clerk wrote it down anyway. You think about your eyes then, the way you've always tried to soften your gaze, to look downward, to not linger. You think of how that still wasn't enough. There's an open debate among historians, some write whole theses on it, about whether women were ever truly prosecuted based on their looks, or whether beauty was just an easy label used to justify deeper fears. But when you're living through it, the theory doesn't matter. The cause is irrelevant. All you know is that your face walks into every room before you do, and now it's walking into courtrooms too. One morning a scribe stops you outside the chapel. He's pale, ink-stained, his fingers twitching like he's used to hiding quills. He says, almost casually, "You know they've described you as too symmetrical." You blink. Too what? It means balanced, mathematically pleasing, like a statue. He smiles faintly, like something made instead of born. You don't ask what that means, you already know. You go home and sit by the fire and stare at your hands. They're rougher than they used to be, the skin dry from herbs and scrubbing and cold. You've never seen yourself as beautiful, not in the way they say. You've never measured your face. But now the idea that someone else has done it for you, that your cheekbones have become a line in a legal text, makes your stomach turn. There was a girl once, 2 villages away, Nadine, quiet, clever. She made soap and sold it wrapped in paper, tied with coloured string. People liked her, but then someone said her hands were too clean for a soap maker, that her skin never smelled like lye, that her smile lasted too long. She disappeared after that. No charges, no sentence, just gone. Some say she was processed through private channels. That's how they describe it when the accusations are too soft for the courtroom, but still heavy enough to ruin someone. You begin to notice the same pattern forming around you. Father Benedict doesn't meet your eyes anymore. The steward forgets to collect your tithe. No one tries to borrow herbs or ask for blessings. It's not hostility. It's something colder, like they're preparing for your absence. You walk through the market and feel your steps echo. You see a woman look at you, then quickly at her child as if shielding her. Someone crosses themselves as you pass. You are no longer part of the village. You are a name waiting to be written. That night you kneel in front of your fire and recite your own name over and over again, like an incantation, like proof. I am not a spell, I am not a shadow, I am not what they say. But the words feel thinner now, like smoke, and somewhere in the archives on parchment you'll never see, someone is writing the next line. She looked like something that could not be trusted. It's the milkmaid this time, a girl barely past childhood, with big eyes and quick feet and a reputation for kindness. She was sweet to you once, you remember, gave you a strip of linen when your satchel tore. Now she can't look you in the face. She's gotten prettier too, grown into her features. She glows the way the young do just before the world teaches them not to. And that apparently is the problem. You hear the whispers before she does, that she's blossoming too fast, that someone should watch her, especially with her spending time near the barn alone, that maybe she's been influenced. You know what they mean? They mean you. They think beauty is catching, that it rubs off, passes along like a fever. If one girl turns heads, she's a wonder. If 2 do, it's a pattern. And patterns, as you've already learned, don't end well in places like this. The milkmaid's mother corners you outside the chapel a few days later, fists clenched in her apron. She didn't used to be like this, she says. Now she brushes her hair twice a day. She hums, her voice cracks. She's drawing attention. You want to say that's not a crime, but you already know it is. This is the trap for girls like her. Be plain and obedient, and they might leave you alone. But show a little light, and suddenly it's your fault when others squint. She's not even trying to be beautiful, and already they're watching her the way they watched you, like she's become something unnatural. You try to warn her gently. You don't say, cover your face or change your walk. You just say, be careful. But the way she tilts her head, confused and smiling, tells you she doesn't understand. Not yet. The world hasn't taught her that being too pretty without status is like walking into a thunderstorm with a silver crown and no shoes. You become the nearest target for every lightning strike. In medieval Europe, the line between peasant and noble wasn't just about blood. It was about presentation. A beautiful peasant girl threatened the hierarchy because she looked like someone who didn't belong to her class. If she carried herself too gracefully, if she caught too many glances, people began to ask dangerous questions. Who taught her to speak that way? What is she hiding? What man has she ensnared? This wasn't just social unease, it was political paranoia in disguise. In the records, there's a chilling number of cases where women of lower birth were punished not for any real act, but for stepping out of place through their appearance. One girl in Toulouse was accused of practicing glamour simply because a visiting noble wrote a poem about her eyes. Another in Cornwall was blamed for upsetting village order by inspiring jealousy in the reeve's wife. Their beauty didn't help them. It hurt them. It put them on trial for things they never did. The milkmaid doesn't know that history yet, but you do. A week passes, and she stops singing. Her eyes are duller. Her hair's always tied now, scraped back with no softness. She wears her older dresses, the ones too small, too faded. It's an act of self-defense, one you recognise. It means someone has said something, or worse, done something. You don't ask, you don't need to. And then you find the charm. It's tied to your gatepost, half hidden under a sprig of thistle. A little figure made of twine and rag, headless, with a black thread wrapped around its middle. Someone meant it to be subtle, but you've seen things like it before. A ward, a warning, a threat, you leave it hanging. That's how far it's gone, past judgment, past gossip, into ritual. The old fears are rising again like swamp gas from a dry well. They've decided you're not just unnatural, you're contaminating others. You walk through the village now and feel the air pull back from your skin. You're not alone in this anymore, but that doesn't make it safer. It makes it worse, because every other girl who draws attention is now tied to your name. The village is building a web of suspicion, and you're the spider in the centre. You think of stories, real ones, not legends, about what happens next. A girl is accused of seduction. A man claims he was bewitched. A mother says her son hasn't slept since looking at you. The church steps in. An inquiry begins, and all it takes is one frightened nobleman or overly pious scribe to give the order. That's the open secret of peasant justice. It doesn't come swiftly or fairly. It seeps in, it curdles, then it takes you when no one's looking. You try to speak with the milkmaid one last time, but she avoids your gaze. Her hands are red from scrubbing. She mumbles an apology and walks away before you can say a word. You don't follow. You just stand there watching the dust settle behind her feet. That night, you see her in a dream. She's older, dressed in finery she never earned, her hair braided with ribbons. But her face is blank, as if she's been carved hollow. You try to call her name, but your voice breaks like glass. When you wake, your mouth is dry, the charm is still on the gate. You think about taking it down, about burning it, burying it, breaking its threads one by one. But something stops you. Because now you understand, the charm is not meant to curse you, it's meant to trap others, to say, this is where the sickness begins. The next story they tell about you doesn't involve witches or mirrors or powders, this one's about fairies. It begins as with a child, doesn't it always? A boy from the edge of the village, the youngest of 5, with a habit of wandering too close to the forest at dusk. One evening, he goes missing for an hour. When he returns, clothes torn and eyes wild, he tells a story that sticks. A woman in white called to him from the trees, her voice soft as wind chimes, her hair gold like firelight. He says she touched his face and told him secrets he can't remember. And who else could it be? He says it wasn't you, not exactly. He says it was like you. But that's enough. Within 2 days, you're being called the one from the grove. You're no longer merely suspicious. You're otherworldly. Something not quite human. And in some ways, that's worse. The medieval world loved fairies so long as they stayed in stories. Beautiful, elusive, magical, and most importantly, elsewhere. But if one ever showed up in real life, it became a threat. The line between enchantress and fairy was paper thin. and both were treated with the same toxic blend of wonder and fear. You are not accused, not directly, but suddenly there are more prayers at dawn, more salt poured across thresholds, more lavender burned behind closed doors. They think you're luring people, that maybe you never aged, that maybe your hair never changed colour because you aren't really from here. The old women are the most certain. She came from under a hill, one mutters in the apothecary. You can tell by her skin, another whispers. Fairies always steal the voices of prettier girls. That's why none of ours sing anymore. It doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to. You hear about a new nickname spoken around fires, Glamour Girl. At first you think it's an insult, then you realise it's fear. Glamour in the old tongue meant illusion, a spell of beauty cast over something darker. They don't think you are beautiful, they think you've made yourself appear that way. They're rewriting the rules again. If you're too pretty, it's not because of luck or birth. It's because you've stolen that beauty from someone, from something. Maybe from the forest, maybe from another girl, maybe from God himself. There's a strange, rarely mentioned historical trend. In periods of extreme social anxiety, plague, famine, war, people start blaming fairies again. The legal records in some regions show a spike in fairy-related accusations during times of collective stress. It wasn't just witches. Sometimes being too unusual was enough to be accused of being not human at all. And beauty above all was suspicious, because beauty doesn't belong in a world full of suffering. The milkmaid stops looking at you completely. She walks in the opposite direction now. You pass a woman pouring milk on the threshold of her house, an offering, old folk magic to keep the fair folk away. You see a charm nailed to the old ash tree, one with your hair twisted into its base. Someone's been cutting bits from your brush. You start wearing gloves. You try not to walk alone, though company is harder to find by the day. Even the animals seem to have absorbed the unease. The stable dogs growl when you pass. A crow follows you for 3 mornings straight. People start calling it your familiar. That's the line, you realise. You're not a witch anymore. You're something older, something harder to prove, and far harder to forgive. One evening you walk by the edge of the woods trying to clear your head. The trees are dark and whispery, rustling with that strange breathless voice that forests have when the wind changes. You hear a child crying. You stop. Wait, but it's only a bird echoing wrong. Still, the sound sticks with you. The next day a boy claims he heard a weeping woman in the trees and saw her vanish when he approached. You weren't even there, but your name gets added to the story, and here's where it gets particularly twisted. Some of them want to believe it. The girls who used to hate you now romanticize you. She's not one of us, they whisper. She's something more. They braid flowers into their hair and sing strange songs under their breath. They long for magic, for stories, for anything that feels powerful in a world so small. But at the same time, they're terrified of you. Because if you really are a fairy, then you can't be trusted. Fairies don't mourn, they don't age, they don't feel shame, they take what they want. You who once scrubbed floors and folded herbs are now believed to be a creature who steps through mirrors and whispers to bees, who leads children astray and never eats bread made with salt. It would almost be funny if it didn't feel like a death sentence dressed up in myth. The worst part is, you start to see yourself the way they see you. You begin to wonder if you've ever been real. If maybe you are just a trick of light, a story someone wrote too beautifully to be true. Your voice sounds different in your own ears. Your skin feels unfamiliar. You flinch at your reflection. You think of other women whose beauty made them legends. Melusine, doomed to be part serpent. Lorelei, singing men to their deaths. They were loved once, then feared, then destroyed. You go to bed that night with the windows shut tight, the doors locked, the veil wrapped around your face, and still you hear them outside. Not footsteps, not voices, just the wind and the soft sound of a story growing teeth. You used to think beauty and innocence went hand in hand, that if you were gentle enough, modest enough, if your eyes didn't linger and your voice didn't rise, people would see your softness and understand that it came from peace, not from pride, not from seduction. But now, standing in the cold dawn outside the chapel, you realise that innocence has never protected you. Not yours, not anyone's, especially not if you're beautiful. The priest's sermon that morning hammers this truth into the place. It's a familiar theme, Purity, temptation, the dangers of vanity. But today there's a new edge to it. He speaks of Mary, the Mother of God, as the only true example of holy beauty. Untouched, unquestioned, divine. A virgin, he says, without stain, without suspicion. Beauty perfected by obedience. He doesn't look at you, but he doesn't need to. Everyone else does. You sit at the back, veil drawn low, hands folded so tightly your knuckles ache. The woman beside you shifts ever so slightly away. The Virgin Mary is everywhere in this world. On the walls, the coins, the hymns, pale, radiant, crowned in stars. A model held up against every woman alive, especially the ones who draw attention. But the paradox is cruel. You're told to be beautiful like her, but if you are and you lack her divine origins, then your beauty becomes dangerous, suspicious, accusatory. She was revered for being above desire. You are feared for being the object of it. There's a silent war in the pews, one fought not with words but glances. Men look quickly, then away, then back again. Women look once and keep looking, their mouths pressed thin. Everyone's watching the shape of your face, not the content of your prayers. You are no longer a person in this place, you're a test. A riddle, like a problem no one wants to solve, but everyone wants to study. And that's the heart of the Virgin paradox. If you're beautiful and chaste, it's a miracle. But miracles are not to be trusted. They're questioned, prodded, feared. And if you're not chaste, then your beauty is a weapon, proof of sin, the cause of every temptation that follows. You know which side they think you've landed on. A week later, the midwife loses a child in the womb, a stillbirth. She weeps as she buries the tiny bundle behind her cottage. By nightfall, someone has said your name in connection to it. She walked past that house 2 days ago. She's never been with child herself, has she? Maybe she gave the pain to someone else. You don't cry anymore. It feels like a luxury now. But late that night, you find yourself kneeling on the floor beside your bed, whispering to the dark. Not to Mary, not to God, just to the silence. Let them stop seeing me. Let them forget what I look like. Let me vanish without being touched. It's not a prayer, not exactly. It's a plea. There's a fringe idea, sometimes traced through mystic texts, that beauty is a kind of divine trial. That those gifted with it must suffer more to prove their worth. That angels were once judged not just by faith, but by how they bore the weight of their own radiance. You think about that now, and it makes your stomach turn, because it implies you're suffering as part of some cosmic balance. That all this was meant to happen, that your face brought this on yourself, and you start avoiding the chapel. At first it feels like cowardice, then it feels like self-preservation. You pray alone, quietly, by the stream or by the candle in your room. You keep your eyes on the flame. You don't ask for much anymore. Just space, just breath, just time. But even in your absence, the story grows. A woman says her husband dreamed of you, and now he can't speak. A boy claims he saw you barefoot in the churchyard at midnight. A man says your reflection appeared in his wine. None of it is true, but none of it is questioned either. Because the paradox continues. If you're pure, you must be holy. If you're holy, you must be terrifying. And if you're neither, then your beauty is guilt carved into flesh. You meet with the milkmaid again by chance on the edge of the forest. Her hair is cropped now, her skin raw from soap. She won't meet your eyes, but she speaks. They said I was looking at you too much. You nod. You don't say, so was I. She continues. They said if I wasn't careful, I'd turn out like you. You smile softly, bitterly. And what do they think I am? She doesn't answer. And really she doesn't have to. You're the ghost of potential, the cautionary tale, the proof that beauty unguarded leads only to isolation. That night, you lie awake and wonder how the Virgin would have been treated if she lived now in this village. Would they have accused her too? Would they have looked at her serenity and seen arrogance? At her face and seen threat? You think maybe yes. Maybe even she would have been burned. The first song arrives as a whisper, carried by the wind through the thatched roofs and low stone walls of the village. You catch it one morning, drifting from a group of boys loitering near the well. Their voices are soft, half laughing, half afraid. She walks at night with silver eyes and turns the moon to watch her rise. You pause, basket in hand, heart tightening. They're singing about you, or someone who looks just enough like you to make it dangerous. Troubadour songs are usually reserved for queens and saints and highborn ladies who leave roses pressed into letters. You are none of those things. But now, somehow, your face has found its way into their rhymes. and the words, harmless on the surface, drip with tension beneath. She smiles and sparks, a priest's regret. Her shadow sings, and none forget. The rhyme is crude, the melody off-key, but it doesn't matter. The damage is done. The song sticks in people's minds like pollen, tiny, weightless, but everywhere. You hear it echoed in the fields, whispered by girls pretending not to play. Even the monks hum it sometimes, caught in their own irony. At first you're stunned, then embarrassed, then frightened. Because troubadours in this world are more than musicians, they're record keepers with rhythm. And once your story is wrapped in a melody, it becomes part of a shared imagination. It stops being yours. It becomes folklore. There's historical precedent for this. More than a few noble women or peasants had their lives rewritten in verse, sometimes while they were still alive. Ballads turned rumours into romanticised truths, stripping away real pain and replacing it with drama, sin or sanctity. If you were lucky, the songs made you a legend. If not, they made you a warning. And in those cases, beauty was always the chorus. You think of one such woman, Elaine of Laon, immortalised in a dozen verses for her lips like blood and mind like snow. The songs say she seduced a knight, bewitched a bishop, and disappeared into the sea, but the records suggest a far duller truth. She was accused of theft by a jealous cousin and hanged in a square. The song survived, her trial did not. Now you are becoming your own version of Elaine. The village boys know all the words. The older ones even embellish them, adding verses about the blush that cursed a king or a girl who danced with wind and flame. They laugh as they sing, but their eyes dart toward you like they're half hoping to see you vanish in a puff of smoke. You try to ignore it. You try to walk through the square with your shoulders back and your veil straight. But it's like walking into a room where everyone's reading your diary aloud in different accents. You're not even angry, just numb. The friar approaches you one day as you leave the apothecary. He's young and oddly gentle, with the kind of nervous kindness that makes him hesitate too long before speaking. "They've sung it in 3 towns already," he says, not unkindly. "Your name's not in it, but they know it's you." You meet his gaze. "Did you sing it?" He looks wounded. "Of course not." But he doesn't deny listening. There's a fringe idea among medieval theologians that music holds moral power, that songs can either elevate the soul or corrupt it. Some monks believed singing about temptation was just as sinful as acting on it. Others thought the music itself was neutral, but what it inspired, that was the danger. You wonder how many girls were dragged to confession because of what a song made someone feel. Now, when you walk through the village, men look at you with a kind of embarrassed awe, like you're something they dreamed into existence. Women look at you like you wrote the song yourself. The tailor's wife mutters, "Some girls sing for husbands, others sing for attention." You say nothing. She continues, "Best be careful when the world starts humming your name." You know she means it as a threat, not advice. You start noticing people treating you like a story instead of a neighbour. They ask strange questions. Do you really walk in your sleep? Can your eyes call rain? Did you steal your voice from a sparrow? You never know how to answer. The truth is boring, and boring won't hold their attention. So you just keep walking. That night, someone leaves a folded parchment on your doorstep. A new verse. She bathes beneath the crescent light, her skin aglow with cursed delight. Men who dream her name too long wake with ashes in their song. No signature, just careful, neat handwriting and a tiny pressed violet. You burn it, but the next day another shows up. You don't burn that one. You just tuck it into a jar alongside all the other things that used to make sense. There's a cruel irony in it all. You never asked to be seen, you never wanted the attention. But now, thanks to the song, you're etched into memory like a melody people hum when they're nervous. You're a story being passed from tongue to tongue, and the more they sing it, the less you exist. You wonder if this is how legends die, not with a trial, not with fire, but with applause. You never sat for a portrait, never posed in a stiff-backed chair with lilies in your lap or silk wrapped around your shoulders, and yet one day there it is, a painting of you, or something close enough to be dangerous. It hangs in the steward's hall, tucked in the corner, beside a cracked window where the light hits it just so. The eyes are a little too bright, the skin a little too smooth, but the resemblance is unmistakable. You freeze when you see it, your face framed in oil and gold leaf staring serenely out at nothing. You never consented to this, never even knew anyone could paint. But someone did, and now your art. Worse, your objectified art. Frozen, displayed, and just real enough to stir recognition in anyone who passes by. The steward catches you looking. It's not really you, he says too casually, just a likeness, inspired by. You want to ask, inspired by what? My skin, my silence, your imagination? But the question curls bitter on your tongue. Portraiture in medieval times was rare, expensive, and reserved for the noble or the divine. To paint someone of no title was odd. To paint a woman without her knowledge, unthinkable. Yet here it is, your face caught in brushstrokes, looking more like a relic than a girl. Soft focus, downcast eyes, holy, almost, dangerous as definitely. Word spreads quickly. A nobleman passing through asks to see the woman in the painting. A pair of travelling scholars take notes. A woman visiting from the next village demands the steward take it down before her daughter sees it. She's too young to know what happens to girls like that. You're no longer just a rumour or a song. Now you're an image, and images live longer than people. The worst part? It's beautiful, the painting that is. Soft, luminous, kind even. Whoever painted it saw you, but saw only what they wanted. They didn't paint your wariness, your sleepless eyes, your fear. They painted something poetic, fragile, a muse, and that's the real danger. Because people love to destroy the things they romanticize. There's a historical case, obscure but unsettling, of a girl in Lombardy whose likeness was carved into the corner of a cathedral because a bishop thought she resembled the Virgin. She became known as the Stone Girl. Pilgrims left offerings at her feet, until someone accused her of heresy. Then they blamed the sculpture, called it vanity, idolatry. They smashed it with a hammer. The girl was never seen again. You dream of that girl now. You see her face shatter in slow motion, bits of marble caught mid-air. You wake with grit in your teeth, heart pounding. The painting becomes something of a tourist attraction. Locals visit to gawk, pretending to admire the brushwork while sneaking glances at the original, you. They look back and forth, comparing, whispering. You start taking side paths, ducking into alleys. You consider wrapping your veil so tight no skin shows at all. Then someone starts leaving flowers beneath the painting. At first it's daisies, then a single pale rose, then a scrap of embroidered linen. Someone is turning your image into a shrine, and that's when things truly begin to unravel. Because now the conversation shifts. You're not just beautiful, you're either sacred or cursed. People argue about it openly. One man says your eyes are too symmetrical to be mortal. A woman insists your beauty must be punishment for sins in a past life. The baker says you're a saint. A priest says you're a distraction. The nobleman who admired the painting returns with a coin and a question. How much to buy the original? He means you. The steward laughs as though it's a joke. You don't, because you know what he means. There's a fringe theory in certain dusty theological texts that images of women, especially beautiful ones, can trap souls. That painting someone without their permission creates an imbalance, a copy of the soul wandering untethered. You don't believe it. But sometimes when you pass that portrait and catch its eyes in the dark, you feel something looking back. You find out who painted it. A boy named Renaud, the steward's nephew. 16, quiet, always watching. He approaches you once in the garden. Hands ink-stained, cheeks flushed. He stammers, "I didn't mean... I only wanted to..." Then he flees before you can finish your sentence. The damage is done. You're part of the walls now, and it gets worse. Someone carves a smaller version into the side of the chapel pew. Crude but intentional. You see it during Mass, your profile etched beside a cross. You feel your stomach twist. You are being turned into a symbol, one line at a time. You think about removing the painting, about sneaking into the hall at night and slashing the canvas, tearing your not face into ribbons. But you know that won't help. They'll say it confirms everything, that you hated beauty, that you feared what the painting revealed, that you wanted control over how others see you. You don't want control, you just want peace, but peace doesn't come when your face belongs to everyone but you. A small crowd gathers one afternoon as you pass by. They don't shout, don't speak, just stand and stare, waiting for something to happen. A miracle, a scandal, a confession. You walk straight through them. Your feet feel heavy. And behind you someone whispers, She doesn't look like the painting up close. You don't turn around. You don't need to. Because you've already learnt the truth. They don't want you to be real. They want you to be beautiful. And when beauty stops being perfect, they burn the painting and the girl. The plague returns just as the summer begins to loosen its grip on the land. It comes in waves, quiet at first. Just a cough here, a fever there, but soon it spreads like a spilled vial of ink, darkening everything it touches. One house closes its shutters, then another. The church bell tolls twice a day, every day. By the end of the week, the air tastes like smoke and lie, and people start speaking in shorter sentences. No one lingers, no one smiles. Everyone watches each other like something might jump out from under the skin. You were already a problem before the sickness arrived, but now you're an explanation. It starts with a funeral. A boy dies in his sleep. Young, pale, no symptoms the night before. By morning he's cold and stiff and his mother's hands won't stop shaking. Someone says they saw you walking past their cottage the night before. Another claims you looked at the child too long during Mass. A third whispers that you've not fallen ill at all, not even once. And that, of course, is enough. In a world where no one understands disease, where plague is a punishment, a curse, a divine test, those who survive are just as suspicious as those who sicken. If you're untouched, they say, it must be because you're in league with something. The irony makes you want to scream. You've barely eaten in days. Your skin is grey with fatigue. But because your face hasn't blistered, because you haven't vomited black or collapsed in the street, they decide you must be the cause, or the carrier, or the witch who bargains for her own immunity. Someone spits at your feet as you pass, not subtly, not by mistake. You don't look up, you can feel the accusation boiling off of them. Why not you? That's the question no one speaks, but everyone thinks. Why hasn't the beautiful girl gotten sick? Why haven't the gods punished her? What charm is she using? What demon is she feeding? They start walking wider circles around you. No one dares approach, but no one dares ignore you either. You become the plague's silent twin, a figure of dread and fascination. There's an old story buried in a dusty monastery archive about a woman named Isabetta, who lived during the pestilence in Aragon. She was said to carry an herbal charm and wore white always. When the plague came, she didn't get sick. People brought her food, gifts, coins, hoping she'd protect them. But when the gifts failed to work, they turned on her, said she was hoarding holy breath, said she was the devil's midwife. She vanished one night, and when they dug up her garden weeks later, they found nothing but roots and a single child's shoe. You remember that story now, you remember laughing when you first heard it. You're not laughing now. A boy comes to your door wild-eyed, shaking. His sister is sick, he says, and his mother sent him to find you. To ask what herbs, he stammers, or prayers, or he stops when he sees your face. You're too still, too blank. You want to help, but you also want to survive. You give him thyme and wormwood and instructions to boil them in water. You don't touch him. You don't even let him step inside. The next morning his sister is dead. By evening someone draws a circle of ash in front of your cottage. Inside it, a small bundle wrapped in black cloth, an offering or a warning. You don't touch it. You just sit by your window and watch the shadows stretch longer across the walls. The talk changes after that. You're not just beautiful, you're protected, which in this world is more dangerous than being cursed. Because the unprotected want answers. They want someone to blame. There's a fringe theory in early medical manuscripts that says beauty is a kind of shield, something about humours and balance, that the perfect outward form reflects internal harmony, making the body resistant to illness. Some believed it, some still do, but even that explanation isn't enough now. Because beauty alone won't justify the funerals. And people want payment. You stop going to the market altogether, you trade through your window if anyone dares come, you sleep in short bursts, startled awake by sounds you can't name. You light candles not for warmth, but for warding. Still they come, not all at once. Just a few. The tanner's wife, the miller's daughter, the old shepherd who used to bring you apples. They gather outside your home in the dark, murmuring words that don't quite reach your ears. You hear your name, though, and something that sounds like deliverance. They don't knock, they just wait. That's when you know it's close, the turning point. The moment when beauty becomes not just threatening, but sacrificial. You think of all the old stories, of village girls thrown into rivers, burned at stakes, buried beneath stones, not because they were evil, but because they were exceptional. and exceptions in times of terror are rarely forgiven. You stare at your reflection in the basin. Your face is thinner, your eyes rimmed in shadows, but still somehow intact. And that alone has made you dangerous. You whisper to your reflection, "Don't be beautiful, not now, not tonight." But your reflection doesn't listen, it just waits. And outside the plague bell rings again, followed by the quiet sound of feet in the grass. You know before you open your eyes that something is wrong. The air feels different, still but not calm. Heavy, as if the house itself is holding its breath. You lie in your bed, perfectly still, listening. There are no footsteps, no voices, but you know someone has been here. You rise slowly. The fire's gone out, but the coals are warm. You didn't leave them like that. Your shawl, folded carefully the night before, is now slumped in a heap by the hearth. And the door, your door, always latched from the inside, stands ajar. You move through your home like a ghost, not wanting to disturb what's already happened. Nothing is missing, but everything is off. You feel it in your bones, the way animals sense storms. You step outside into the grey morning, and there it is. Another charm. This one is not made of twine or cloth. It's your own comb snapped in half, lashed to a sprig of dried yarrow with red thread, hung from your gate like a prize or a warning. And across the way you see her, Marta, the baker's daughter, standing in the road, arms crossed, hair unbound, eyes hard as river stones. You used to share food. She once gave you honey when your voice went hoarse from too much winter air. Now she doesn't blink, just watches. And when she finally speaks, it's louder than it needs to be, loud enough for the neighbour on the stoop and the children pretending not to listen. "We know what you are." You don't respond. You don't have to. She isn't speaking to you, not really. She's speaking about you, to the village, to the air, to the gods themselves. She's claiming the story. For weeks, women have whispered behind hands, cast glances, drawn boundaries. But now it's coming into the open. You feel it happening, like a shift in the wind before lightning. What began as murmurs and then accusations and then songs has turned into something harder, more deliberate. They are beginning to turn on one another. That's what beauty does here. It infects, it divides, it breaks things apart from the inside. Later that day you pass two girls by the mill. One is crying, the other says, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have looked at him." And you know the rest without hearing it. Someone else has been blamed. Another girl, too young, too curious. Maybe she smiled. Maybe she wore a ribbon. Maybe she simply existed with a little too much light in her. Now the village sees beauty as a kind of weapon, a contagious thing, something that spreads. Not just from you, but from girl to girl, friend to friend, sister to sister. You're not just dangerous now, you're divisive. They begin watching each other, hunting for signs. Is her hair shinier than it used to be? Why is she laughing? Why did he look at her twice? You can feel it. The jealousy curling inward, turning sister against sister, mother against daughter. And somewhere deep in your mind, a terrible thought takes root. This is how they survive, not by loving each other, but by offering each other up. You see it unfold in real time. The milkmaid, once too pretty for comfort, now wears soot across her cheeks. She avoids your eyes. Not out of fear, out of strategy. She wants them to know she is not like you. Not anymore. At the well, a woman named Brisa slaps her own daughter for combing her hair outside. You hear the smack from half a street away. The next morning someone throws a rock through your window. Not large enough to hurt, just loud enough to be clear. There's no note this time, no charm. Just this sound of laughter fading down the path. And that's when the betrayal begins. Not from men. From women. The ones you thought might understand, might protect, might at the very least hold their silence. But fear changes people. And beauty, especially in a time when everything feels broken, becomes a blamable offence. The fringe scholars have written about this, though no one likes to admit it. That women turned on each other during inquisitions. That many of the witch trials began not with priests or bishops, but with neighbours, with mothers, with friends. Jealousy cloaked in piety, fear dressed as concern. They called it moral vigilance. You call it what it is, survival by subtraction. You pass Alice in the street. The last thread of friendship between you tugs for a moment. She opens her mouth, maybe to greet you, maybe to warn you, but says nothing. Just presses a cross into her palm and hurries on. By nightfall, another message is scratched into your door. before you take us to, it's not even written with anger, just exhaustion. You start to wonder if the women have convinced themselves that destroying you will protect them, that if they remove the source of attention, the pressure will ease, that the men will stop staring, that the priest will stop preaching fire and purity, that their daughters will be safe again. They want to believe that the danger is not everywhere, it's in one place, with one face, yours. That's the real horror. Not the plague, not the priests, not even the fire you know is coming. It's the way the fear has turned inward, twisting what could have been solidarity into silent, sharpened blame. You sit by the broken window listening to the wind. It sounds like whispers, like promises you didn't make, like girls practicing how to survive in a world that punishes them for being born bright. You don't see the foreigner arrive. You hear about him first, 3 days after his boots have already stirred the village dust. Word spreads like it always does, through the mouths of women pretending not to talk. He's tall, they say, pale, with hair like ash bark and a long black coat that marks him immediately as not from here. He carries scrolls, a bag of herbs, coins stamped with a crest no one recognises, and most dangerous of all, he asks questions. You meet him by accident near the well. He doesn't approach you the way the villagers do, with hesitation and superstition, but with open curiosity. You try to step aside. He doesn't let you. Not rudely, just enough to make it clear he knows who you are. Maybe he's seen the painting. Maybe he's heard the songs. Your name? He asks, like he's taking inventory. You answer, reluctant. His gaze is strange, not lustful, not reverent, not afraid, just studying. I've read of you, he says, in fragments, letters. There are 3 different accounts already, all conflicting. You stare at him. You didn't know you'd become an academic footnote. They say you've bewitched an entire region, he adds, matter-of-factly. The girls here stop speaking after seeing you, that men stop sleeping, that animals run from your scent. And what do you believe, see you ask? He smiles faintly. I think you're inconvenient. It's not the answer you expected, but it's the truest one anyone's given in weeks. Foreigners were always a double-edged thing in villages like yours. They carried new ideas, yes, but they also disrupted balance. And right now, the balance here is delicate. The tension around you has become so taut it sings. People barely speak your name anymore. They just nod toward you like you're a cursed relic. The last thing you need is someone walking in with no fear of breaking the spell. The man, he calls himself Lucien, doesn't care, or pretends not to. He follows you once all the way to the stream where you pause to breathe in air that doesn't carry whispered threats. He stands a few paces back. They won't let you stay much longer, he says, not unkindly. You nod. I know. He crouches near the water, dips his hand in. You know what the difference is between the stories about you and the truth? You raise an eyebrow. He smiles. The stories are easier. There's a long pause, and then he asks, do you want to leave? No one's ever asked you that before, because they all assume you either deserve what's coming, or that you're rooted too deeply in the rot to be pulled free. You don't answer. That night you find a small parchment under your door, folded 3 times, sealed with wax. Inside a map. No name, no instructions, just a mark for a road through the woods. And a note. Tomorrow, before sunrise, so you don't sleep. Instead, you pack a small satchel. Herbs, a scarf, bread wrapped in cloth, a silver coin. You leave the painting untouched. Let it hang there like a ghost. But when you open the door to go, he's already standing there. Lucien looks at your bag, your face. You've waited too long. You know what he means, because as the sun rises, you hear it. Voices outside, many. Too many, the sound of feet on dirt, cloth rustling. A voice, clear female, older, saying, we just want to talk. You know that voice, Marta's mother. You step out into the morning light. Lucien at your side, and there they are. 24 villagers, mostly women, lined up along the path to your cottage. Some hold crosses, some hold ropes, some hold nothing at all, just clenched fists and tight jaws. They're not shouting, that's the worst part. They've come like this is a sacrament. Like this is what has to happen. You scan their faces. Alice is there. The milkmaid, Brisa. Even the girl who once sang your name like a prayer. No one meets your eyes, and Lucien whispers, if you want to run, run now. But you don't, because there's nothing on the road that can change what's already happened. You step forward, Hands visible, no spells, no glamour, just you. I've done nothing, you say loud enough to carry. No one replies. You try again. You've made me into something I never claimed to be. Still, silence. You laugh softly, tired, hollow. You want me gone? Say it. That stirs them. The first voice comes from behind. You've cursed our girls. Another. You led the plague here. A third. You took my daughter's innocence. She walks like you now. Lucian shifts beside you. You can feel him tensing, preparing. You raise a hand, not to cast, not to beg, just to speak. I didn't make myself beautiful, you say. You made it dangerous. They don't care, because fear doesn't listen. You take one step closer, and that's when the stone flies. It misses, barely, but more follow. Lucian grabs your arm, pulls you back. You turn to run, not from the pain, but from the certainty that this ends the way it always does. Fire, rope, silence. You and Lucian flee down the path. The village doesn't chase, not yet. They have made their stand, they've performed their ritual. You are meant to vanish now. You don't stop running until the trees swallow you. And even then you don't speak. Because what would you say? That they turned on each other? That they offered you up like kindling? That beauty, your beauty, was the match they used to light their own fear? No. You just keep walking. And behind you the morning grows quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet left behind when a village finally gets what it thought it wanted. You follow the narrow woodland path until your feet blister, then crack, then stop complaining altogether. Lucian walks a few paces ahead, silent except for the occasional glance over his shoulder to check that you're still there. Neither of you speaks much. Words feel too heavy now, like relics from a life that doesn't belong to you anymore. The birds return by midday, timid and half curious. The woods breathe easier the farther you move from the village, as if even the trees were holding judgment back before. You don't cry, you're too dry for that. Whatever water lived behind your eyes was spent long ago, drained through every false smile, every moment you lowered your gaze to spare someone else's pride. There's nothing left in you but motion, and even that's a choice now. You wonder if this is freedom. It doesn't feel like it. There's a monastery far to the north, Lucian tells you once you've stopped for a rest. A place where they study strange texts, welcome unusual minds, and most importantly, ask questions without lighting torches afterward. They'll take you, he says. Eventually. You nod. Not because you believe him, but because pretending to believe him is easier than collapsing. That night, the fire crackles low and warm. Lucian falls asleep quickly, one hand on a satchel full of scribbled notes. You lie awake, eyes tracing the trees above like they might spell out answers. You think of the village, not with rage, not even with grief, but with a strange numbness, like remembering someone else's childhood, or a dream you tried to tell only to forget halfway through. You think of the girls most. The milkmaid with her soft brown eyes and bravery too quiet for this world. Alice, who almost spoke up. The baker's daughter. The ones who painted you as threat and saviour in the same breath. You wonder what they'll tell their children, what the story will become now that you're gone. You already know. She was too beautiful to stay. Her presence unsettled the crops, distracted the men, lured the rain in all the wrong seasons. They'll forget your name and keep the story. That's how it always goes. There's a historical footnote, an obscure entry buried in a failed bishop's diary, about a girl accused of glamour in a village that no longer exists. She left before judgment, vanished into the woods. Decades later, travellers reported seeing a quiet figure on a hilltop, eyes like glass, speaking to no one. They say she glowed when the moonlight hit her. They say her name was never written down. They say a lot of things. You sleep lightly, the forest keeps its own rhythm. Not threatening, just indifferent. Somewhere an owl screeches, and something smaller dies quietly. Even out here, life is beautiful and brutal in the same breath. In the morning you don't speak, you just walk. You wrap your veil tighter, not out of fear, but from habit. The face beneath it no longer belongs to the village, or to history. It barely belongs to you. Lucian eventually breaks the silence. You never used it, he says, and you understand what he means. The power, the temptation, the edge you could have claimed once they began circling. You could have played the witch, become the glamour they already believed in. They would have feared you, maybe even worshipped you, but you didn't. Why not? He asks. You think for a moment, then shrug. I didn't want to give them a neat ending. He grins faintly. You might be the only woman they'll ever remember for not doing something. You walk in silence a while longer, the forest thinning as the hills rise. Eventually you speak again. They were afraid of what they saw in me, you say. But what terrified them more was seeing themselves in me. Lucien doesn't respond. Because you're right. That's the part no song ever gets right. Beauty wasn't your weapon. It was their mirror. You didn't curse them. They cursed themselves when they made your face the proof of everything they feared. Power they couldn't control. Softness they couldn't name. Fire they couldn't put out without pretending they were saving someone. You reach the edge of a cliff by midday. The valley below stretches wide and gold-dotted with specks of distant roofs and tilled fields. Not the village. A new place. Farther, cleaner, temporary. You sit beside a crooked pine and close your eyes. The sun warms your skin, and for the first time in months no one is watching you. Not as a threat, not as a symbol, not at all. You are, for a few minutes, completely unobserved, unmirrored, free. It doesn't last, but it doesn't need to. Because for the first time, the beauty in you is not an accusation or a prophecy. It's just part of the scenery. Just another flicker of light in a world too vast to blame you for shining. Lucien unrolls a scroll beside you. You'll need a name, he says. You look over. He grins. Not a new one, just a different shape of the old one. You nod slowly, then speak your name. And this time it feels real. This time it's not followed by silence or suspicion or smirks. It's just you, saying it, owning it. A name reborn, and you walk on, and the wind, for once, carries no whispers behind you. You'll hear stories like yours, even centuries later, told under different names, set in different villages, with new songs and fresh accusations, but the bones stay the same. A woman who drew too many eyes, a girl too lovely to be safe. The quiet fear that beauty, in the wrong body, could upend everything, and each time the story will be told a little differently. Sometimes she becomes a saint, other times a sinner. Sometimes they let her live in a tower staring out at the sea. Other times they burn her without ever learning her name. But you'll know better now. You'll remember what it felt like to carry that face through a world that didn't ask for it but couldn't stop staring. You'll remember the weight of a gaze that thinks it knows you. The sharp edges of a compliment that doubles as a threat. The slow unravelling of being seen too much and understood too little. And maybe, just maybe, next time someone tells you that beauty is a blessing, you'll tilt your head, smile faintly and say, that depends on the century. Out there, far beyond the village and the woods and the whispered songs, someone's walking freely. Her veil is tucked away. Her eyes are steady. And though her name has changed, though the world will never see her quite clearly again, she still walks, still breathes, still shines. She survived, and in a world that punished her for being too beautiful, that more than anything is the triumph. So rest now. The fire's down to embers, the sky outside is soft and dim. You've made it through the dark. And when you dream tonight, dream of freedom without fear, of beauty without blame. Dream of a face the world finally let be her own.